on the Twitter. John says, shout out to all Ron fellow fans and Corvette fans in Canada. We're going to have Ron Fellows on in the Hackney Global Broadcast Centre in the morning sometime. Just waiting to find out what time Ron will be available for us. And Drew Adamson, what are your thoughts on the GTD Pro Class? Talked about that with IMSA President John Doonan about an hour or so ago, Drew. I think for IMSA, it's the right thing to do. I don't think they really had a choice with only 3 full-time entrants in GT Le Mans. There's some new GT3 rules about to come around that the SEO and the FIA have been involved in that makes it far more a technical class, which has always been, for me, slightly. I love GT3 racing, don't get me wrong, but I've always been against GT3s doing anything at Le Mans, going to Le Mans, particularly as the top class of GT. And the reason I say that is because the lack of what I would call a technical rule book, it's a balance of performance, and currently GT3 a balance of performance and conformity formula. So you build the car, you have it balanced for its performance, and then what it's scrutineered on is nothing other than it is as per its passport. Each time that you bring it to the track, all the nuts and bolts have to be exactly the same. That leaves the option open to build very, very special cars for something as important to manufacturers as Le Mans. And when you've been around as long as I have, and that is a very long time, you will see in that, the folly in that is that the costs go up massively, and you see special cars being built by manufacturers just to win at Le Mans, and they are taken out the realms of being customer cars at that point, and ultimately it kills the class. It happened with GT1 most recently, and others as well. And that's why I've always been a little bit wary of having the current style of GT3 cars in terms of how they are defined and policed. If we get a more technical rule set with measurements defining the box and all that sort of thing, it might work. But to be honest, I don't think you need to change very much with GTE as it is at Le Mans. When GTE AM at Le Mans is and has been for the last couple of years vying for the most numerous of entries along with LMP2, and it's the same in ELMS. It's healthy in ELMS as well.
I agree in the short term, but I can't see GT and GTLM lasting in the long term.
Yeah.
With only one outlet for manufacturers to race in.
No, I agree.
So the question is, what do we do in 4 years' time when this generation of GTEs are all replaced by other cars? The Porsche, the Ferrari replaced with something else, because there's going to be no incentive for the manufacturer to build new ones. Do you, at that point, just say...
Unless people still want to buy them, Nick.
Yeah, our gentleman field is now P3. Do we always need to have GT cars at Le Mans? I know it's heretic to think about that, but if you had a P1, P2 and P3, is that enough? Or do you need a car that looks like a car that's on the road?
Well, but ultimately that's what the new top class is meant to be, cars that look more like what's on the road. That kind of hasn't happened yet. Glickenhaus's car will be road legal, but it's not like something that looks like a Porsche 911 is going to be at the short end of the field. When Porsche do their LMDH, they'll be styling cues. It's more likely to look like a Taycan, isn't it? Let's be honest. That would make perfect sense for them, or one of their other hybrid offerings, a bit more like a Panamera around the front end. I like the old GT. Remember the GT1? When we talk about GT1s there, the GT1 Porsche came about because they were launching a brand new Porsche, and it was the first 911 with a water-cooled engine. That was the 996 model year with the Friday headlights, and that was where the money came from the marketing budget from that new car. So there's merit. I see there's merit in that in the front of the field. I just think you've got to be so careful with GT racing.
I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I don't think GT3 should be in its current form should be at Le Mans because it's too subjective. It's not objective at all. It's completely subjective about what it is, and it's not quite as bad as Heinz Halbrand doing 10 laps of Valencia anymore. But it's not it will get gained. I mean, the manufacturers have managed to gain GTE, which is far harder. I bring to the court the first year the Ford GT, for example, but. I think it'd be a difficult thing, but I think there's going to be a situation in 4 years' time where, it's going to be difficult. The only company I can see actually making GTE cars is Porsche because they can make them in a commercial manner easily.
Well, I think a technical-based rule book and the ACO. I mean, this has all come about because the ACO set their technical working party, and Vincent Beaumenil, who's their sporting director, they set them a couple or 3 years ago now. I remember talking to Andrew Cotton about this from Race Car Engineering, head of Race Car Engineering. They set them a project to effectively write a set of GT3 regulations for an quote-unquote ACO version of GT3. Now, it would seem stupid to do that and have that technical exercise if at some stage you weren't going to have GT3 cars in the big race. They already have them in some of their other championships, but they wanted to take ownership of some regulations to protect the sporting integrity of the world's greatest motor race at Le Mans. And I think having done that, and then now knowing that we're going to see a new set of GT3 regulations, how much of that thinking the ACO put into being 2-3 years ago, whenever it was, will be in the new rules. I hope a fair amount of it, so that we can get to a situation where there's some technical, and without waivers as well. Unfortunately, I've heard from inside the technical working group at LMP, I've heard GT3, that waivers have been handed out all over the place already in the draft regulations. Dave Alcock says, do you think a technical rulebook for GT3 Pro replacing GT Le Mans could be as simple as a minimum and maximum box size, minimum weight, and then control with fuel usage, tank size, fill rate, etc.? Yes. But I still think you need to have a set of regulations. I used to be able to look at a car and say, that's not legal. I remember crawling underneath the back of a Jaguar that went to Le Mans with Paul Gentilotti's team and finding a transaxle in the car and thinking, well, that's not legal. You're not allowed to move the gearbox. You weren't in those days. Didn't matter, it didn't last 24 minutes, never mind 24 hours. But that car, strictly speaking, wasn't legal by the letter of the regulations. Sam Collins and I at Sebring many years ago crawled over a certain prototype, and we were looking underneath the ducts at the front, and we could clearly see what would be described in the rules as wing-like structures, which were expressly forbidden in that part of the car, and asked questions about it. The Ford GT, there was questions asked about the aero on that, but interestingly, the aero on GT Le Mans cars was more free than prototypes. Those flying buttresses at the back of the Ford GT, just behind the back window, up from the rear wheel arches, they were wings. They were aerodynamically shaped. You wouldn't have been allowed to do that in a prototype, but you weren't a GT. That's the sort of stuff I'm talking about when it describes a plane angle and how big the chord's got to be to make it a wing type device or not. That's a technical rule book, and GT3 doesn't have that. GT3 says take your base car, build a GT out of it, we'll balance it and then just bring it back to the track. I am oversimplifying that because it takes a lot of work to get your GT3 paperwork in line, and about 6,500 photographs I've been told by people who've done it. But I'm trying to simplify the explanation of it all. There's no reason why we couldn't take a car that isn't a GT3 right now and build a GT3 out of it. Yeah. You don't even need, strictly speaking, you don't even need the manufacturer to be on board with it. So it doesn't have to be a manufacturer build. Indeed, we've seen that from GTs in the past, that maybe manufacturer being blessed them, but that's kind of changed now because it's customer racing. And the good news about it is that it's an income stream. Customer racing is is still the next big thing. Porsche have been doing it for 70 years, so everybody wants to do it. That's why the TCR cars work so well that we talked about earlier on. That's why I believe that LMDH and DPI 2.0 will herald in a new golden age, another golden for endurance racing, because LMDHs could well become the Porsche 956s, 962s of their generation, and that's exactly what we need in endurance racing, which to a greater or lesser extent down through the years is not being paid for by manufacturers, it's being paid by individuals or groups of individuals. So customer racing has to be there at all levels of endurance racing. I'll get off this one next time.
It's a good setup. So I sat there agreeing with you. It doesn't make for a great conversation on a commentary, but it is true. And one thing that's interesting, and perhaps we can discuss this later in the show, is how they're going to differentiate with GTD Pro and GTD. Are they going to give the pros 10 more horsepower, or is it just the talent of the drivers and they'll be the same apart from that?
That's a very good point, and I would think TBA on that. I think again it'll come down to the specification of the car as well, to what can be done and what we think that is. Let's have a quick look at the standings. We've got some pit stops going on. In fact, we've had both the leaders in. Shea Adam, tell us what's going on. Top three, in fact, in at the sharp end of the field.
We've got Renger van de Zande in. This should be fuel and tires only for Renger. Also into the pit lane, AJ Allmendinger, and he will be staying in the pit lane. I guess he's got to go back into the booth or to the motorhome with the cat and the dog. But that is Dane Cameron getting back in, I would imagine. He has not been in the car since the first quadruple stint that he did to start the race. We've got Tristan Vautier out in the number 5 Mustang sampling Cadillac. Oliver Jarvis was in the 55 Mazda as well. So very, very busy down here on the pit lane, but everything clean. And the fuel nozzle comes out on the MSR Acura, the last car that I was waiting on. So now we're clear again.
And we start another racing hour with a Mazda in race update. With pit stops going on in DPI, let's start at the other end of the timing screen in our 5-class structure that we have, of course, this year. In GT Daytona, it is Nicholas Nelson for AF Corsa in the number 21 Ferrari that leads by 2.1 seconds. Andrea Caldarelli's just got into the Formula Racing car and has just turned that car's fastest lap last time around, a 46.3. Not as quick as the fastest lap of the GTD race, that's a 45.7, and that has gone to the car that leads. Zachary Robichon is in the FAF Motorsport Porsche. He's another 8 seconds further back. He's got 2 seconds on Jan Halen for Wright Motorsports in the teal blue Porsche in 4th. Jack Hawksworth in 5th for the number 14 Lexus from Vassar Sullivan is another 10 seconds further back in the top 10. Top 5 made up by Russell Ward for Winward Racing. That number 57 car is another 11 seconds away from 5th position. In LMP3, Stephen McAleer, friend of the show, well-known groovy person, for Mueller Motorsports Duquesne, still leads in the number 6 car. Remember, that's come back from 4 laps down at the end of the first hour to lead from Sean Creech Motorsport by nearly a minute now, 57 seconds. And Oliver Askew is aboard the Riley Motorsports Ligier in 3rd. He's another minute and 38 back from Joao Barbosa, who is driving that Sean Creech Motorsport number 33 at the moment. In GT Le Mans, Corvettes are back at the front of the field. It's their turn to lead 1 and 2 again. They've been the Racing Competition car jumps up to second on the pit stops for a few laps. It's 3 from 4, Garcia from Tom Milner, 8/10 of second between them, so the bungee cord hasn't got any longer or shorter between those two Corvettes running around in lockstep. Risi, as I say, about another 5.5 seconds further back. Then the 2 BMWs, they're 10 seconds further back and 3.5 seconds between them. In LMP2, Timothy Bourrier for Tower Motorsport, the number 8, in 8th position, has 21 seconds ahead of the Win Autosport Orica in 2nd. Then the Cetilar Racing car is another minute and 15 further back. Just having pitted, actually, that car, Antonio Fueco is still behind the wheel, and Paul-Luc Chatin for Era Motorsport also just out the pits is 34 seconds further back. So that's another pit stop influenced standing right there at the moment. Managed to let everybody, I think, cycle through. So Kamui Kobayashi is leading now by 11 seconds over Renger van der Zande. That is the 48 Cadillac from the 01 Cadillac. Two of the lighter coloured cars out there. Konica Minolta Acura, number 10 car for Alexander Rossi in 3rd, is 5 seconds further back and has 22.5 seconds on Felipe Nasr in the red and white number 31. And I'll quickly get down through. Dane Cameron in 5th for Meerschaank Racing, 6th Tristan Vautier, and all of those are on the lead lap. That is 65 seconds, and we've got a car stopped out at turn 5, which is the West Horseshoe. Shea Adam, what can you tell us?
On an out loop, Paul-Luc Chatin in the Era Motorsport LMP2 Orica is stopped on course at turn 5. This could bring out a full course caution if he does not get moved once again, but it's still showing up as stopped on track. So this could be not good news for some people out there, and very good news for those who have just served their pit stops.
Yeah, let's see what happens as we've gone through that another race hour, under 16 hours to go now. Fabulous moon this evening back in the UK. Alan Prosser just stepped outside to what he calls the big fridge. That's the outside world outside the front door. He's getting another adult beverage. You could read by the light of the moon where Alan is at the moment. Not quite full moon. Can't be far away. Very chilly across the UK this evening. Thanks for staying with us at, what is it, coming up to midnight at Daytona. That means coming up to 5 o'clock in the morning in the UK. Thank you for staying with us. Just
couldn't see the 18 car. We followed a couple of cars through the kink through 5 into 6, and the car was nowhere to be seen, and it didn't be crawling either. So if he had stopped, he's managed to pull it off. There is actually another road sort of inside the two horseshoes. There's another inner road you can go into. You may have pulled it into, which makes it theoretically safe, but not quite sure how they rescue it without pulling out a caution.
Well, there are 2 gates there actually. There's a gate that's at the International Horseshoe, which is part of the old track actually, so that's paved through the kink and down to, I'm having a quick look as we get a shot from the onboard on the Whelen Cadillac there. There's also an access gate to the left just before the right-hander at the West Horseshoe, and Felipe Nasr flashing his lights there at another prototype ahead, which wasn't Alexandra Rossi. So he's about to put a lap on somebody there. Dane Cameron in elegant isolation at the moment in the number 5, in the 5th position in the number 60 car, with about 14 seconds between himself and 4th and 12 seconds between himself and 5th. It's an odd one. That race control have definitely put out the message that it's stopped at turn 5. I was just going to say, has it turned another lap? That's the question.
Yeah, it's got yeah.
So
yeah, the last lap around was 2 minutes and 37 seconds in length.
He's in the pits.
He did just bring it back into the pits, yes.
Yeah. So some problem on an out lap. Paul-Luc Chatin has dropped him out of the top places and down to 6th for the Era Motorsport car. Now that could be something on an outlap, Shea, like a loose wheel perhaps, or some issue that they've had.
We've definitely seen that before. Would not be a surprise, but it does seem a bit strange that he definitely stopped at turn 5, managed to continue, went past the pit lane and completed another lap and then brought it into the pit lane. So I think it's probably something a little bit more sinister than just an obvious loose wheel. I think it's probably something to do with a control-alt-delete needing to happen.
He's restarting the car, and now it's still not clear whatever gremlin it is. So they'll go in, they'll either give him a quick steering wheel change and hope for the best, or it's the dreaded plug in the computer and go and just look confused for 20 minutes.
One of the things that can happen when you come out of the pits, of course, is that the pit lane speed limiter fails to clear, and you're chugging around in a very unpleasant manner, because race cars aren't meant to go slowly, even when you have to for safety reasons in the pit lane. It's exceptionally annoying to be on it for too long a time. It doesn't actually do the engine or the driveline that much good either. Cast your mind back to your viewer and listener a few years to Le Mans, when the resonance of being on the limiter behind the safety car actually caused a problem with, I think it was the carbon fibre drive shafts, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
The prop shaft.
It unwound the prop shaft, not Roddy's car, didn't it?
Yeah. That's a while back now, mind you. I've took that out of the Rolex.
That's frightening, that one, because that's probably 10 years.
Isn't it funny how as you get older, time stretches and compresses, but with no apparent reason for what seems like 5 minutes ago and what seems like 20 years ago. And neither of them were the case. They were all about 3 years ago. You know, it's very odd. Very, very odd indeed. Well, what have we learned then, Shea and Nick, in the last 3 hours as we head in towards the witching hour at Daytona, and Sunday morning beckons, and the first shift of the Sunday service will be the Reverend Johnny Palmer and his team coming back into the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. We've had a couple of decent long runs, over an hour and 20 minutes now on this one, and I'm not really seeing anybody dominating. It looks great for Kamui Kobayashi. He's pulled out 13 seconds on Renger van der Zande. Pit stops around the corner though, Nick, and we've seen the Cadillacs at the front of the field with very different pace as they go through their stops. Kamui's been in, only been out for 9 laps, and Renger van der Zande for, let's see, 7, 6. So they've still got the majority of their stint to go.
I think it's safe to say, and this is going to sound very negative, we haven't learnt very much, to be honest, because we still have, all right, the Mazdas are lap off, the next yellow flag will get in. All 7 cars are in contention and are behaving differently at different times in the run. And don't forget, in how many hours now, 6 or 7 hours, it's going to be light for the last 8 hours of the race with the heat, and it's all going to change again. So and looking at GTLM, all the cars that didn't have an accident in the first lap are all within, a few seconds of each other, and that'll continue going on. So I think it was great to get that, effectively 6 hours of running with a 1 yellow flag. But all it's taught us that these people know what they're doing. Well, now they've stopped having silly penalties, but I couldn't in any way put any particular car as a chance of winning, or more of a chance of winning someone else.
What about the other classes, Shea? LMP2 has been a battle of attrition, as Nick alluded to a few moments ago, the latest being that number 54 car. Are you seeing any patterns there? Do you see any favourites there?
No, being the short answer. LMP3 completely wide open. We've got a big gap between the number 6 Mjolnir Motorsports Sean Creech and then the first of the Rileys with Oliver Askew behind the wheel now. It's a big difference there, but again, we aren't convinced that they're going to keep going round and round like they are. Look at Core Autosport, possibly the best prepared out of all of the LMP3 cars, just given the dint that the team came off of running the factory Porsches the last few years. So they struggled with some brake issues. Who's to say it's not going to affect some of the smaller teams that are making their IMSA debuts in this race? And then in LMP2, it's anything but wide open. I mean, the 11 Win Autosport have kept their heads down. They've kept quiet. They've driven a great race so far, but we're only 8 hours in. We're a third of the way through. I think everything's going to change before the end of this one.
The only one where I am seeing a bit of a pattern, Nick, is in GT Le Mans. You know, it only takes 2 cars for a race. All 5 cars are still relatively close since they were closed up with that last full course yellow. The 2 Corvettes do seem to be running to a plan, and they're staying about a second apart. It's 3 in front of 4 at the moment. The Ferrari goes by on a pit stop cycle for a few laps and splits them, and the 2 BMWs are 10 seconds further back. But I get the feeling that the Corvette have got something in reserve there if they were being pushed.
If you read like this, and obviously similar for the qualifying race, it does seem that the C8R does have a slight edge. But again, temperature doesn't go up. You don't know how the end has been set or how the Ferrari is. But it's if you had to put your house on a GT11 winner at this point, it would be Corvette, because they've managed to lead every single time relatively easily. And it's always the point that they know, particularly in GT, there is no point wearing your car out, pulling out a lead with 16 hours to go. You may as well just have a comfortable few seconds and then worry about it again. As we said before, worry about it with 3 hours and 4 hours to go.
It is the Corvette way. I mean, they've ground out results before. Look, it's the 4th of July race here. They got that one spot on tactically, because it's not just about the pace of the cars, it's about the nous on the box as well. Through for another lap, the Allied Cadillac of Kevin Kobayashi, and the lead is a little over 13 seconds, 36.2 last time around, compared to a 35.1 for that car's best lap. This is good pace from Kamui, and it's consistent pace as well. Drops into the 37s only when there is traffic around. These are not the kind of drivers you see making huge mistakes, normally speaking. Next driver is up on the stand, suited and booted. Don't read anything into that. We tend to be ready just in case they need to come in. Tristan Fortier catching 5th position, Dane Cameron at the moment. Number 5 Cadillac and the number 60 Acura. I said Dane Cameron was having a quiet run, if you remember, not so very long ago. Well, 12 laps of that advantage that he had over Tristan, 12 seconds rather, has disappeared in 8 laps. And meantime, when I said don't read anything into the next 48 driver sitting on the box with the helmet on, A, it's a bit warmer. B, you can probably plug in your radio and listen to what's going on somewhere. But C, Kamui Kobayashi's still got half his stint to do in this one, so he maybe 15-20 minutes as much as still to run in that car. So forewarned is forearmed. Yeah, 13 laps, so he's got another 7 or 8 laps before he comes in. I'd also say these times as well, having your race helmet on, which is a perfect fit to your head, and your race balaclava is a great way to keep your social distancing as well. You're in your own bubble, and you don't have to wear a mask because you've got a carbon fibre one in front of your face, and of course you've got the balaclava as well. I always liked to get ready nice and early, because there's nothing worse than having to rush around and find your earplugs, or worse still, get ready and on as you realise that the car's coming in that lap, you realise that you haven't put your earplugs in your radio buds in your ear, and you've got to take your helmet and your hands device and everything off, find them and put them in your ear.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
No.
It's bad enough just when you play the earplugs when you get you on a motorbike, let alone you actually talk to the pits in a racing situation.
Kobayashi beginning to stretch his legs. Fastest lap for that car, 34.918. last time around. Johnny Palmer is getting ready to take you into Sunday morning, just a couple of minutes before midnight. Welcome back to the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, JP. We've had another decent long run, and I think we've decided that other than GTLM, pretty much, there's no real rhyme or reason, and certainly no big patterns that we want to pull out of this. Next 3 hours could be pivotal, often are, as we go into Sunday morning, JP.
Yeah, it's definitely a milestone in the race, isn't it? And I think treated as such by many of the teams as well. You've done well to last this far, and we've still got 3 hours and 40 minutes there or thereabouts to go till half distance. And yeah, just to be able to make it into Sunday morning is often tricky, particularly to get there without anything happening to your car.
I mean, that is the way to break up 24-hour races for the teams, as well as for us. You know, midnight will be a milestone. Half distance will be a milestone for these race teams, Johnny.
It will, and then there are, you kind of focus on, you know, moments ahead that are many hours away, and then all of a sudden you're brought right back into the present moment, as Alexander Rossi was just then, with two GT Daytona cars right in front of him out of turn 2, and he had to squeeze between an Aston Martin and a concrete wall to driver's left. So you can't afford to be thinking too far into the future for risk of losing exactly what you're doing on that lap, on this particular lap in this moment. So he's through that hairy period of time is Rossi, and now up onto the banking and heading for the tri-oval once again. The race is led by Kamui Kobayashi, as John has mentioned. 134.918, his best lap so far. Renger van der Zande in the chasing Cadillac is 17 seconds away, and then you got the chasing number 10 car of Alexander Rossi that he shares with Elio Castroneves, Felipe Albuquerque in the lineup there, as well as Ricky Taylor. And there are more GT Daytona cars just around the corner of the International Horseshoe, so got into a little bit of clear air, and now that's gone again. So working his way around the second of the horseshoes on the infield with two Lexus, actually, I make it. They've taken on a completely different look overnight. So one with the blue roofline illuminated brilliantly, and one with the red. Actually, they're more easy to tell apart at night than they are in the daytime, although there's subtle sponsorship differences between the 12 and the 14 cars. Again, 3 abreast on the back straight for Alexander Rossi. Now, has he got any concern immediately behind him and distraction therefore? Not really. Felipe Nasr is on the same lap in the 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac, but a good 24 seconds away, so he can fully focus on the road in front, and it's relatively clear for him now, heading through turn number 4, Speedway turn 4, and back to the start-finish straight. Win Autosport leading the LMP2 category. Driving that 11 car is Thomas Morel in the leading Orica. Gabby Aubry over a minute away. So again, Win Autosport in a reasonably comfortable position. There's then Antonio Fuoco in the Dallara for Chetila Racing, running in 3rd place. So Jeremy Shaw coming back to the broadcast once again, joining me, Johnny Palmer, in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. We are past midnight. It's now Sunday morning, Jeremy, and that's it's just a few more minutes into the book, but psychologically it's a big hurdle that these teams have reached now.
It is indeed, Johnny, and this is always for me a tremendous part of the race. A bit after midnight, next couple of hours or so, are always really, really interesting, I find. And this has been a fascinating race so far. It's been that super stint by Kamui Kobayashi there, just turned his best lap, that car's best lap of the race, just 3 or 4 laps ago in the dark of night. Very, very impressive, and he's extended his lead over the number 01 car of Renger van der Zande. It's now up to over 15 seconds. And before this round of pit stop, before the last round of pit stops, which was about 13 laps ago, 12, 13 laps ago, the gap was 7 seconds. So it's more than double in this run for Kobayashi extending his lead. Alexander Rossi hanging nicely there in the third position. Felipe Nasser is up into fourth again now, number 31 car. Seems to be running a good bit better than it was kind of earlier in the late evening, so to speak. I'd say we're definitely night time now after midnight. And Dane Cameron has been slipping back in fifth position in car number 60. That's the Meyer Shank Racing Acura. And I just put a note in to the team, and Dane Cameron indeed is double stinting a set of tyres right now. So that would explain why he's losing just a little bit of time. And he is coming under pressure now from Tristan Vautier, who that number 5 car, you might remember, had a drive-through penalty for jumping the restart. It was out an hour or so ago. And it was more than that now, an hour and a half ago, I guess. And that since then, he has been struggling to make up that time. But Vautier now pretty much on the tail, actually he is on the tail of Dane Cameron. So they are now battling for 5th and 6th positions. They are the last cars on the lead lap, because Oliver Jarvis is still 1 lap down in that number 55 Mazda. That was a car that ran super well in the early stages, Johnny, but has been struggling a bit quite recently. They also had a drive-through penalty earlier for speeding in the pit lane. That was very early on, so it's not really a factor. But more significant was the fact that they missed the opportunity during that most recent caution period to get their lap back. There was a miscommunication between the pit lane and the driver, and he came in a lap too soon, and that effectively negated any possibility of getting back onto the lead lap. So a bit of a mistake there from Mazda. Plus, I hear the car's not running quite as nicely, not handling quite as nicely as it was early on. But this is overnight, much cooler now. In the daytime, it could be much better. I'm sure there will be some more full course cautions before then. But this run's now been, what, an hour and a half or so, Johnny, hasn't it? Under green flag right now.
Yeah, I can check the information on that. You're bang on. Actually, an hour and 35.
6:48, yeah.
So again, a good spell. We managed to get to almost 4 hours on the previous green. The yellow in between was pretty much 20 minutes. So that was the full caution period, which allowed both sets of cars, prototypes and GTs, to make their pit stops. Average times would favour Kamui Kobayashi in this 19-lap stint. He's 19 laps old at this point. He's managing to just about do a 136.0 on average. And looking back to Renger van der Zande's times, at 136.8 across his 15 laps. You're right to draw attention to Dane Cameron, though, who is slower than that, but we know the reasons why. And good investigative work there by Mr. Jeremy Shaw to find out that Dane having to use the same set of tyres again. Risking possibly being caught by Tristan Vautier, therefore, in the recovering number 5 car. And he's right on his tail, isn't he, now, having said that. There's that little bit of time that's being gobbled up by Tristan Vautier with every single lap. And we've got a real battle on our hands now between the 60 and the 5 cars for 5th and 6th places. It's Jeremy Shaw and Johnny Palmer in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, and dealing with the VP Racing Fuels Pit and Paddock reports is Joe Bradley.
Evening, gentlemen, or should I say good morning?
Only just, but yes, you should.
Yeah, you know what? It's
evening
this
for
time.
me.
It's this time of this race, guys, that I think these drivers really show their class and show why they're the best drivers, sports car drivers in the world. We expect them and we take it for granted that they're just going to churn out the laps and keep on just going round without any incident, and they really are. And we're in the realms now of just stretching that tyre life to the max. And we've seen now Kobayashi, for instance, in the leading Ally Cadillac Racing number 48. He did a 15-lap stint, which was then followed up with a 22 laps, 21 laps, 20 laps, We look at the car behind them in number 1. We had Scott Dixon earlier. His stints were punctuated by a short 10-lap stint, but after he took over the car from Kevin Magnussen, just on about lap 142, he did. We saw Scott do 22 laps. We saw Scott do another 22 laps, and then we saw another 22 laps. Then we had that short stint because of the yellow. He did 10. He's back out. He extended that one to 24 before he brought that 0-1 car in and gave that car over to Van der Zande. But this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that puts these guys out there, and it's the difference between the guys at the front, the guys in the DPIs, especially, which I've just used as an example there. We see them going round and round and round, and what we kind of take for granted is that all of this time they're hitting their marks, they're hitting their apex, they're pressing that brake pedal at their marks, and they're keeping those cars on the track as best they can at such fantastic speeds. And if they slip up in the slightest, they know that even at this stage, with 15.5 hours remaining, the race they can lose sight of that race. They can lose a grip on this race. It's that tight, even at this stage. It's incredible, this race.
It is relentless, and particularly in these long spells of green, there's sort of nowhere to hide really, because even the odd lap that is a second or so slower than it should be, it's very easy to spot that, and not only by your own team, but all those that you're competing with as well. And chinks in the armour like that will readily be observed by teams, and most often exposed as well. So you've got to stay in the hunt as much as possible. That crucial lead lap, as always. Another pit caller then is the Ally sponsored car, the Ally Cadillac racing machine of Kamui Kobayashi from the race lead. Renger van der Zande stays out and therefore becomes the new race leader again. And so the lead marching back to Alexander Rossi, who also stays out. And the number 10 Acura is now down to 13 seconds. But that radical paint scheme on the Ally car, the whites, the pink and the purple, looking great underneath the floodlights as it heads down pit road. And already some tyre temperature being sought by, I assume, Kobayashi staying at the wheel. I was watching tyres being changed, so they'll be stone cold. Do you reckon it was a driver change there, Jeremy?
Saw some video of Jimmy Johnson, I think it was, on the pit wall about 15 minutes or so ago, to wait until when the timing clicks over. Kamui is he's been at the wheel of this car for quite a long time now. He's been at the wheel for 2.5 hours. Indeed, yes, it's just clicked over. So it is Jimmy Johnson now at the wheel of that leading, what was the leading car prior to this round of pit stops. The gap from the 48 to the number 01 car was about 18 seconds on the lap before Kamui Kobayashi brought that car onto pit lane. So now the 7-time NASCAR champion is back out into the race for his second. They're running through the second rotations now. So Jimmy did a good long stint early on to start this race, and now back at the wheel of that number 48 car. That's exactly where he would want it to be, isn't it? In the lead.
Very, very different conditions as well. He's no stranger to night racing, with so much NASCAR experience under the floodlights. And I suppose deliberately the team didn't give him the stint go from day into night. So there was also opportunity to practice an hour and 45-minute free practice 3 on Thursday night. So ample opportunity to get the required laps in order to qualify for the race. You have to have got those, and also a few extra where possible, just to get properly acclimatised to lack of light. There never really is a lack of light around this place compared to other tracks around the world that do twice around the clock races. But it's about also where you run the risk of being blinded, not only by the floodlights themselves, but also returning cars on the infield, for instance, that the lights designed for the race cars to be as bright as possible. There's no option for a dipped headlight that you would have on a street car here. And and when you get cars returning from the Western Horseshoe and you're motoring on into there, there's always the chance of lights just momentarily blinding you, disorientating you, and it's about being used to that and ready for it when it happens. So the Ally car now hitting the curb perfectly through turn 6, and again on the outside of the exit of that corner, up onto the high banks will go Jimmy Johnson, but the Renger van der Zande driven Chip Ganassi Cadillac now leads with the chasing car that was Alexander Rossi coming into pit road and being serviced. So the Wayne Taylor guys, the Konica Minolta Acura team, descend upon it. There's a windshield tear off removed, and the fuel is still going in. The tyre change is done, well, relatively sedately, but I remember it was on this car that they had the hiccup on the rear right. Sedately because it's the fuel that generally takes the longest time, and therefore everybody else can perform their duties in a fairly chilled out manner, but that wasn't the case on one of the stops for the rear right corner, because the car was lowered far too early before the personnel on the rear right had completed the job. But they've come back from that slight hiccup, and running just 3 seconds prior to that stop from the Dane Cameron car number 60, which streams across the line now actually to produce a 3-second lead. Rossi will take a bit of time to get up to speed as well, depending on how old those Michelin tyres are. I understand it's only Dane Cameron, or was only Dane Cameron, that was needing to nurse his car on older tyres. Mustang sampling 5 car is in as well. So Tristan Vautier is pushing hard on the tail of Dane Cameron. He's coming for his 15th stop. It's in GTLM. It's a Corvette that continues to lead, but a wave of pit stop for the other 4 cars has jumbled up the order a touch. So Ferrari from Risi Competizione is in the pit lane. John Edwards in his black BMW number 24 is also down pit road, but Antonio Garcia rejoining. Timo Glock in the red BMW team RLL M8 rejoining the racetrack as well. I expect, therefore, Tommy Milner to pit next time around. Interestingly, though, he's only made 8 stops. Yes, he owes us 1, but there are other cars that have made as many as 11 now, the Ferrari and the BMW, for instance. So was it that they took advantage of stopping under cautions more so than the 4 car? I mean, it's not unusual to see the car with the least amount of stops leading the class, but I hadn't realised that even at this stage of the race to see a difference of, well, it will be 2, won't it? 8 to or 9 to 11 stops. So a firm advantage for the silver Corvette. Sister machine is on about the same sort of schedule, running in 4th place for Antonio Garcia, car number 3. This place loses none of its atmosphere at this time of night, and if you have headed to IMSARadio.com to click on the live video tab, then hopefully you're enjoying our audio perfectly synced with the visuals live from the world centre of racing, and they overhead shots just never lose any of their majesty. To see the cars at great distance but very close to one another, just pounding out the laps, and you get an idea of the scale of this place. It's an awesome oval track used by NASCAR, but equally so, just as competitive and more inspiring when the infield is in action as well. A pit stop for the 0-1, Jeremy Shaw from the race lead.
Indeed, lap 285 laps completed there by that car. 22 lap stint for Renger van der Zande. That's pretty standard for that car. The number 5 car, Tristan Vautier, we talked about him pushing hard to catch up with Dane Cameron during his stint. 21 lap stint for the number 5 car. The number 60 is finally in now on lap 285, so that's a 22 lap stint also for Dane Cameron. I'm pretty sure he will be very grateful for some new tyres this time around. He managed to hold his position ahead of the number 5 car. We'll have to wait and see now whether the fact that number 5 was able to get out a couple of laps ago, 2 laps ago, that car made its pit stop, whether it's able to make up some ground before the number 60 car gets back up to speed.
Yeah, it's about trying to be quicker on pit road and then taking advantage of the car that has stopped later but is on cooler tyres, and scrambling for grip when the car behind us has had a couple of laps already to build the temperature, and hopefully for the chasing car can pick the rejoining car off, but it's never quite as simple as that. There's a bit of a queue developing now on the infield, not for the first time in this race, an LMP2 car needing to be overtaken by the 31 Whelen Engineering machine. Not going to do it into the kink at turn 4, so we'll need to wait maybe for the braking area into 5, and the 31's going to have to go around the high side. I'll say that's the 11 car. Yes, it is, as the leading LMP2 machine. I thought I could see the lone digit, number 1, illuminated as its positional light, and Thomas Merrill for Win Autosport goes a touch wide deliberately to allow car 31 through. So Mike Conway lost a short amount of time there, and takes to the high banks once again. In GT Daytona, Matteo Cressoni, I remember him scything through the order in the Daytona class in my last shift. The AF Corsa Ferrari wasting no time at all, and keeping at an arm's distance Corey Lewis now from Paul Miller Racing's Lamborghini Huracan. Jan Halen for the Wright Motorsports team, that's a Porsche running in 3rd, and a Lexus 4th. So again, 4 different manufacturers in that top 4. Aaron Thielitz for Vassar Sullivan then makes up the top 4 positions in car 14. And Conway now confirmed into 4th place because of the pit-stopping Dane Cameron, now rejoining, and Conway, I guess on that lap, has managed to pick him off as predicted. So Whelen Engineering back into the top 5. Also past Dane Cameron is Tristan Vautier. So all that pressure in the earlier stint finally results in success for Mustang Sampling, up to 5th place and crucially ahead of Dane Cameron. You have to think Dane is on some slightly better tyres this time, and therefore in a position to offer a response during the next stint. So this could get very tasty over the next half an hour or so. Joe, I suppose that sometimes you've got to take your medicine at various points in this race. If you are going to be double stinting tyres restricted in this race as they always are, and sometimes you're going to be in a good place regarding Michelin rubber, as in a brand new set. Sometimes you've got to just live with a rather tired set beneath you.
It's always the balancing act, isn't it? It's about optimizing your run, but also managing your tyres. And the person on the pit wall at Mazda, Lena Gade, she has that saying of push without risk, and it really is that. And where you can make up the time is by siding through the traffic and timing your move through the traffic, not getting held up at all. But it's once you start really having to push those tyres, that's when things can kind of come back to haunt you, and you can save a bit of time in the pit stop by just fueling, and we can change the tyres at the same time as fueling, but it's still, it still shaves off those few seconds in the pit stop. We talk all the time, Johnny, don't we, about, if you lose time in the pits, it takes an absolute age to make that time back up out on the track. So if we can shave time in the pits to a minimum, then we are going to gain track time, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these tyres being double, triple, and sometimes even quadruple stint at a time.
Yeah, you're fighting for tenths of seconds out on the racetrack, and very easily a slip up in the pit stop can cost you whole seconds. And we saw, I think, 10 of them evaporate for the 10 car when they made that slight error on the rear. Jeremy reminds me that it's 38 sets for the DPI class that you get, and that is for the entire race week. Now, is there a division anywhere in the regulations that says you need to use some of those 38 in practice, or is it entirely up to you, Joe?
Yeah, you can use them however you like, but that does cover all the practice. It's not qualified now because that was last weekend, but all of the practice sessions, of which there were 4 leading up to this race. So yes, that is the allocation for the entire week. So they'll be making more. They can't put fresh tyres on at every pit stop. That's the bottom line here. So there are times in the race where you're going to where you are going to have a double stint, and obviously you want to get those out of the way early on, because you will for sure want fresh tyres every new stint for the final several hours of the race.
The one thing I had noticed though is that the stint we think Dane Cameron was on older tyres, it wasn't him in the previous stint. So do we think that those are tyres from an earlier Dane Cameron stint that then been the other side of the wall, cooled down a little bit, and then reapplied to car 60 later on?
Well, good point. I didn't see whether they changed tyres on that pit stop. I admit it would probably be unlikely they would have changed tyres. But then again, it was AJ Allman that got out of the car. If AJ said the car was working fine on that set of tyres, maybe that would have been all it needed for him to stay out there. So don't honestly know, but I did ask the question, and I was told that he was double stinting.
Yeah, it's just from experience at Le Mans, double stinting can be literally keep the same tyres from one stint to the next. Other times they do this clever thing where they actually take tyres off and they go through a completely separate heat cycle and are designed to do that as well, which is an incredible bit of tyre wizardry, really, because you're taking various layers off the tyres and still there is performance beneath. But that is the modern day tyre technician, Joe, and at LMP1 level, which we've now lost, and we go into hypercar era in the World Endurance Championship. But in the days, let's say, when the WEC had Audi and Porsche and Toyota, each manufacturer had its own tyre technician, and they were looking at the tyre wear and how it behaved on each individual car, and also looking at this heat cycle element as well.
And you know what, Johnny, the back of the pits, the pits side of the pit wall, the other side of the pit apron, I should say, it's a never-ending sort of stream of activity behind there. It's like rush hour, pretty much constantly, the whole of this 24-hour race, where you see tyres being coming off the car. Now, please don't imagine that once the tyres are taken off the car, they're just left in the corner to cool down. They're taken back to the garage, to the awning, where they're redressed and they're inspected. They'll be minutely inspected for cuts and abrasions and bits of wear that are really going to put a big question mark on that particular tyre. Also, they'll be put under a heat gun, and you'll take the layer of pickup off, which is basically as the slick tyre is used, the rubber melts, and some of that rubber peels off and just ends up on the track. And cars behind will then come along and pick that rubber up, and it's called, we call that pickup. If you've ever heard that being referred as pickup, well, when the tyre comes off the car, it sometimes has layers of rubber that really don't belong there. So you redress the tyre and go through that inspection phase and check how much tread is on that tyre. Because even though they're a bald tread pattern, there's still a layer of, there's a level and amount of rubber that is called the tread on that tyre, and there'll be wear indicators on the surface of the tyre that will tell the tyre technician just how much rubber is left on that tyre, and the tyre technician will make a decision as to whether that tyre can then be recycled back into the program of the car. It may even be that when we get back to the pit garage, as it is, we kind of cycle through and mix and match sets of tyres that have come off the car. So you can't mix and match tyres from different cars in your team. It's got to be from the same car. There's nothing stopping you using the two rears and the two completely different run to then go back on the car for a later stint. And this is a constant. It's a constant machine. Kind of behind the scenes, we think that, a motor race is all about the guy and the girl behind the wheel. It's not. It's a fully fit, complete team effort thing. And when times are better, if you ever get a chance to get to this race and spend some time behind those behind the pit wall, behind the pit garages, up against the fence, and just see the hive of activity that's going on. It really does remind me of a beehive. So a hive of activity is probably the right term to use.
Yeah, worker bees all doing their own stuff, but it's about also it's all about everybody knowing each other's roles, trying not to get in each other's way, but it becomes a little bit like clockwork, I suppose. There is a real science to it, though, as well, and every team will be doing that. Particularly important in the DPI category, though, with the heavily restricted tyres. I mean, all categories are. It's a question of making sure you don't lose track on your spreadsheet as to which tyres need to be where. The fourth-placed Porsche, Zachary Robichon, is just heading out of the first couple of corners. Pfaff Motorsports Porsche, with its trademark tartan livery, sort of half and half shared with the silver rear on that car for this year. And again, some green LED lights that make it easy to pick out. It's being chased by Aaron Tielitz in the Vassar Sullivan Lexus. But having said that, I think Robichon's just made the move on Tielitz to grab fourth position away from the Lexus, which will put two 911s now into the top four. Best of the two Lexus is therefore fifth. And then we got an Aston Martin for Richard Westbrook, the Vantage number 97, down in the 146.7, so able to lap at a similar speed to Tielitz and Robichon for that matter as well. So they're motoring on at an even pace, but the problem for Westy is he's got about half a minute to break down before he can be involved with the scrap for fourth position. And it's still Matteo Cressoni for AF Corsa, leading the class by nearly 18 seconds over Corey Lewis. Of the 19 GT Daytona starters, just the one car that is out of the race, I make it, or certainly shown as stopped. Now, we had confirmation earlier on that 3 LMP2 cars had retired, and I'm assuming from the current state of the screen, Jeremy Shaw, that Frank Pereira's GRT Grasser car is out of the race, or is it that it's just behind the wall receiving some work? Car 19.
That had 19. That was the one that had the what looked like a fire at on the end of the back straight. That was some while ago. I think that car has been retired. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see that car again. Looked a bit terminal, let's put it that way.
I see. I can picture that. We've had dramas also in the pit lane in the past with a Lamborghini or two catching fire. The 49 starters that we had has now become 45 runners in the race then. But well, reasonable distance into the race and a small amount of attrition. Maybe not as much as in previous years. Let's hope we can keep it that way for as long as possible. Sally Jolich now rejoining the race in the RWR Eurasia Ligier in the LMP2 class, running in car 51. Sally Jolich sharing that car with Sven Muller and Cody Ware and Austin Dillon. You recognise the name Sally Jolich, though. He's has been a regular runner with TF Sport, with Charlie Eastwood and Donny Adam as part of Tom Ferrier's team, the WEC. Right, that was in the European Le Mans Series. So getting more experience now, with probably his first drive in a prototype. Continuing his week at Daytona behind the wheel of these high downforce cars. Exciting times for Sally Jolich and where his career may go to next, as the race is led by Jimmy Johnson in the number 48 car, and Jimmy just heading out of turn 2 through the kink at 2A, the right and the left, and now onto the brakes into the first of the horseshoes on the infield. Jimmy's car that was earlier driven by Kamui Kobayashi remains at the front, therefore. We had the cycle of the latest pit stops, and Jimmy's trying to nurse this 3-second lead, but Renger van der Zande not hanging around in his wheel tracks, found about 0.6 of a second on the race leader on that one lap alone. So there's another gap that is starting to come down, Jeremy.
Yes, indeed. And on that last pit stop, the the 01 car changed only 2 left side tyres on the Chip Ganassi Racing entry car number 01, Renger van der Zande. He's now running a, this is his, he's made 2 pit stops. This is triple stint here for Renger, which is about normal for these guys these days. But hats off here to Jimmy Johnson, who he came out of the pits with about a lead of around about 5 seconds, 4.5, 5 seconds. It's come down to maybe 3, but that's pretty darn good going for somebody who really doesn't have a lot of experience, well, hardly any experience in this sort of a car. Of course, he's also done a fair bit of testing over the winter to prepare for his partial IndyCar campaign with the Chip Ganassi Racing team. So he's getting used to downforce cars. And Jimmy also, to get prepared for the completely different sort of cars he's driven for the most part of his stellar career, has also been getting a lot of time in a Formula regional car as well, the American F3 series. He's been driving one of those cars and getting a lot of miles in, just pounding around and getting used to a much lighter car than a stock car. And this car's got, still got a pretty good weight to power ratio, just to become more familiar with the surroundings of the single seaters.
Yeah, and got a number of drivers that are getting used to slightly different disciplines of the sport this weekend, whether they be drivers that are far more used to GT cars, making the adjustment to perhaps their first prototype drive. And Jimmy's kind of in the same boat. I mean, hugely experienced on the big ovals and the short ovals as well in NASCAR. But as you say, those cars, although they do have a little bit of dependency on aero, nowhere near the sort that the 48 car that has, and the confidence that you must show going into the medium and high-speed corners, because that invisible hand that pushes down on the car to give you all the extra grip is not necessarily there unless you've had massive experience of it. So you've got to have faith that it'll help you turn in every single corner, and the faster you go, the more you'll gain the grip. But he will know that full well, and impressive that he's adjusted to it so quickly. We are going to have a battle on our hands, though, no doubt about it, with the more experienced Renger van der Zande now just a second away from the NASCAR start. Alexander Rossi 17 seconds away, but not able to lap. Well, it was a slower lap, wasn't it, for Alexander Rossi that time around, at 1:38.8. Caught some traffic, no doubt, when the 2 cars ahead of him, one is in the 1:37s, the other is sub 1:36. And Mike Conway able to produce about the sort of pace on the last lap as the race leader is doing as well. So Rossi maybe into a phase where we've got older tyres on that car as well, with the Acura that is in 3rd place, far outpacing its not quite sister car, but a similar machine from Meyer Shank Racing, the Acura DPI car number 60. Dave Cameron should be into a happier mould now, and with newer tyres beneath him, and he's only 0.3 of a second on the tail of Tristan Vautier now. So we have got potentially a role reversing here. Vautier was doing the chasing in the previous stint. Now Cameron looking for an opportunity to get by, and likewise stocking battle for the lead as well, with out of the international horseshoe. That's the scrap for 5th and 6th that I've mentioned between Tristan Vautier and Dane Cameron, and the battle for the lead is down to just 1.3 seconds now. We're going to have eyes everywhere, as is always the case at the Daytona 24 Hours. Jeremy Shaw, several battles all happening together.
Indeed so. Those 2 overall leaders working their way through the GTLM leading pair as well. That's the 2 Corvettes. Antonio Garcia now in number 3 car is ahead of the number 4. They've been separated by not very much for most of this race. It's number 3 ahead of number 4, with the two long-time stalwarts of this Corvette racing team, Antonio Garcia and Tommy Milner, driving at the moment. But Davide Rigon is at the wheel of number 62, Risi Combinazione Ferrari. That was a car, you might remember, that was called for a penalty earlier, and incident at the bus stop called for incident responsibility, a drive-through penalty. That car remains only about 11 seconds off the lead, and then the two BMWs are running in lockstep also about another dozen seconds further back down the road. Number 24, John Edwards, just ahead of his teammate Timo Glock. So at this stage in the race, with coming up to 9 hours down, still we've got 5 cars having a tremendous battle in GTLM.
Yeah, with
by the way, the number 79, the Porsche, had that big problem, of course, early on in this race. It's still running well now. Kevin Estre is driving that car at the moment. It's 37th position overall, and is about a dozen laps, 12-13 laps off behind the other cars in GTLM. It's going to be a tall order to make up that. It is possible, if there's a lot of caution periods. We thought at the early part of this race it's going to be an awful lot, but then we've had 2 pretty long periods of green flag running, so that certainly is not playing to the benefit of that Porsche. But the Porsche is running well, and it has set the fastest lap of the race in GTLM a good bit earlier in the proceedings. And that time was set by Kevin Estre, who's at the middle of the car right now.
So it's midnight 38 in Daytona, and that means with almost 9 hours completed, we are very far away from another hour being ticked off in the race. Time therefore for a Mazda in-race update right here on RS2 IMSA Radio. Tuned to the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre with myself, Johnny Palmer, and Jeremy Shaw, together with Jay Bradley. Adding updates. Jimmy Johnson leads with the Cadillac DPI car number 48, not very far away, completing 300 laps, by the way, for the Allied Cadillac Racing team. Cadillac Chip Ganassi Racing are in second place, and within a second now of the race leader, Renger van der Zande with car 01. Third is the 10 of Alexander Rossi for Konica Minolta Acura, and the Wheeling Engineering Cadillac of Mike Conway running in fourth place, car 31. Then it's Tristan Vautier and Dane Cameron completely together and having to deal with traffic, and also Dane Cameron looking for an opportunity to get by at every turn of the course. So 5 and 60 nose to tail for 56, and in seventh place is the 55 Mazda Motorsports DPI for Harry Tingle. LMP2 is led by Win Autosport in their Oreca for Thomas Merrill, number 11 machine. Gabby Aubry for Tower Motorsport is in second place, and nearly just over 50 seconds is the lead margin in LMP2, with Andrea Veliki in the 47 Chetelaar Racing Dallara running in third. GTLM is led by 2 Corvettes, Tonio Garcia and Tommy Milner. 1.6 seconds separate the 3 and the 4 C8Rs. Then it's the Risi Competizione Ferrari of Davide Rigon, 62. John Edwards and Timo Glock, both in BMWs from the same team. Team RLL are 4th and 5th, 24 ahead of 25. LMP3 is led by the 6 car, which has driving it Stephen McAleer, the Scotsman, ahead of João Barbosa for Sean Creech Motorsport. Moulmer Motorsport, by the way, Duquesne leads the class. Oliver Askew in the 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier is third. And in GT Daytona, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, a Porsche and a Lexus. How's that for a top 4? AF Corsa lead it with Matteo Cressoni, car 21. Corey Lewis is second, car number 1, Paul Miller Racing. Jan Halen third for Wright Motorsports, car 16. And Aaron Thielens for Vasser Sullivan, number 14, Lexus. Another race hour is completed. So really not that very far to go now. Of course there is. There is 15 hours remaining on the clock. You're tuned to RS2 IMSA Radio. Wave from Kevin Magnussen, who is very much enjoying this race from the Pratt Perch, chilling out currently, watching his man Renger van der Zande on lap 301. Well, hoping to keep the pulse relatively low. These race drivers can do that, of course. They'd much prefer to be in the car and doing the attacking. But there's now only half a second between the second place car of Renger van der Zande and the race leader, Jimmy Johnson. This stint started for Jimmy with a 5-second lead. And now he's got Renger van der Zande all over the back of him. has held up at all at this point. This might be Alexander Rossi's opportunity to slash the gap of 15 seconds that he has to third position. Mike Conway will be wanting a bit of fireworks ahead of him as well, so that he can join the scrap. Fourth place in Cadillac. They are completely together. Jeremy Shaw, who joins me in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, heading through Speedway Turn 3. That is the battle for the overall race lead.
Yeah, pretty good, isn't it? Tremendous stuff. Very close between these two. I'm impressed by what Jimmy Johnson has done here. This is very, very different for him, but he's turning some very, very good laps. Pretty consistent, working very nicely through the traffic, and to stay ahead of someone like Renger van der Zande is no mean feat. Okay, Renger's only got 2 fresh tyres his last stint, but still, I'm impressed by what Jimmy is doing there. You talked about Alexander Rossi. 6 laps ago, he turned that car's best lap of the race in a number 10 Acura. It was a 1:35.253. And then a little while, maybe 20 laps or so ago, Kobayashi, who was driving number 48 car at the time in the lead, he turned that car's fastest lap as well. So it's really interesting to see, to me, you know, some of the cars going faster and faster as the race goes on. Others, not so much. Number 31 car, for example, number 5 and number 60, all those 3 cars set their best laps within the first 15 laps of the race. And haven't really come close to that since. As I speak, Mike Conway brings the number 31 car into the pit lane. This will be a regular stop for him on lap 300. It's a little bit early, actually. 300. Well, no, 21 laps. That's about what that team has been doing. Some of the other Cadillacs are doing 22 laps, but the number 31 car seems to be only doing 21 on a regular basis.
Okay. Got off strategy from some of the other cars relatively early on. But yes, 21 on the previous lap for Nasser. He'd done a 22 before that. And then we're kind of into the phase that was affected by yellow flags. So not reliable to read too much detail into that. It was a 20-minute caution pretty much between 3 hours and 50 minutes of green, and we're now up to 2 hours and 15 minutes of this green segment as the 48 car comes in to pit lane. So from the lead of the race, Renger van der Zande now called as the race leader, but I think that happened after Jimmy Johnson peeled off, so actually overtaken on the racetrack, and therefore kept his defence up. At times that was very hairy indeed, particularly a lap prior to his in-lap. He didn't go around the outside of a whole gaggle of cars at turn 2. I suppose that reduced the opportunity for Renger van der Zande to force an overtake, because there really was only one single file route past all of the lower class bunch of cars, and then there wasn't the scope to get a move done into the international horseshoe. But Jimmy Johnson, who took the car over on the previous pit stop from Kamui Kobayashi, will stay on board. That's confirmed now as he leaves. But a new set of tyres, which he's desperately trying to get temperature into as quick as possible, weaving on the pit road, and he'll do a bit more weaving probably on the run down the back straight as well. Time. An LMP3 car, which looks very much like a Duquet, heads out of the left-hander at Speedway Turn 4. It is a Duquet, and it's the Motorsport America entry, car number 6 that leads the class, known as Stephen McAleer. He's got 30 seconds as a gap back to Joao Barbosa. But on the average times, I wonder how they compare on this particular stint to leaders in LMP3. Should be able to tell you that. 15 laps so far for Stephen McAleer on this particular stint. It is close between McAleer and Barbosa. McAleer's done 15 laps, Barbosa, the Portuguese, 16 laps, and they are, well, here's the average. For McAleer, it's a 146.058. For Barbosa, a 146.057. There is 1,000th of a second in it on average times across pretty much 15 laps. Phenomenal consistency from both drivers there, and that gap has not altered at all. Therefore, first to second, it's maybe changed very, very slightly here and there, but it's pretty much 30 seconds between the leading Duquesne and the second placed Ligier. An indication as well that with this reset for 2021, with the new chassis for LMP3 coming in, bigger engine, new design for both the ex-Norma, now Duquesne, and the Ligier, but it looks like their performance levels are completely the same, which is testament to those that are balancing the performance, and also a great set of regulations when you've got completely different manufacturers building to the same regulations, different cars. To get the performance that accurate is most impressive. Sorry, Jeremy, struggling to hear you there. Say that again.
Oh. How about the third place car down at P3? Oliver Askew seems to me to be turning some pretty good laps in that number 74 car as well during this stint.
He is even quicker than the two leaders.
Yeah.
145.3. So yes, you're right to point that out. The two leaders doing pretty much exactly the same times, but on average, 6 to 7 tenths of a second quicker than McAleer and Barbosa. So yeah, we need to look at the gap second to third coming down as well, which is about the same, 25 seconds there or thereabouts. So yeah, not a surprise that Askew
The number
is
5 car
so
still
well.
in the pits.
Car 5 is labelled in the pits, yes, at the moment. It's in fact, Jeremy, behind the wall. It's not only in the pits, it's in the garage. And it's got damage on the left side of that Cadillac. Now, what happened here was this on the in-lap. Oh, there's a car backwards at turn 1, and it's got completely T-boned there from a backwards Porsche. So that's what's happened. Missed that at the time, but at the point, it's the 16 Wright Motorsport car, isn't it? I think it's the Wright Motorsport Porsche.
Come out of the pits, I think, hasn't it?
The Wright car, you mean?
Yeah, I think I've just been in the pits. Let me just check.
So maybe an outland car 16.
It's Patrick Long. Patrick Long, he's just come out of the pits on that lap, I think.
Hit the brakes, the car did a 180, and he's then heading towards turn 1 backwards and cleans out the 05 Cadillac, absolutely T-bones it. And these cars are built very, very tough indeed, but there's really not a lot left to that left-hand side of the car. So presumably the 05, well, how's it got from its resting position into, well, behind the wall? Because I haven't got a time that would tell me that it's done a very, very slow lap round back into the pits again. Unless, of course, it's not triggered any timing loops as it's done so. But Tristan Vautier, we'd be expecting to see a lap time of 3 or 4 minutes in order to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It may have managed to sneak into the paddock via one of the other routes, I suppose. Just not triggered the pit, although it is labelled in the pit. So at some point it's gone through the loop, and perhaps, of course, Jeremy, it's probably missed all of the infield, hasn't it? And therefore had that lap completely deleted by timekeeping as a non-legal lap. Therefore, we don't get it displayed on the screen. But there's huge dismay, as you would quite rightly expect out of Mustang Sampling and JDC Miller Motorsport, thrust into this rapid repair work. It's been put up onto the incompressible jack stands, and Joe Bradley watching this along with Jeremy Shaw and myself, Johnny Palmer. How quickly a race can turn, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. I'm just looking at those pictures there on the live stream. That's my environment, mate. You know what? It's about how a team reacts to that kind of adversity that sets the men from the boys, so to speak, or the girls from the women, to be correct. I've got a theory as to why that car hasn't triggered the timing beam. The Cadillac team tend to be the first pit apron on pit in, and also there is a turning in point to the paddock behind the wall area right at pit in, so they basically come in the pits, and before they get to their pit apron there is access to the paddock, which they'll have turned immediate left. I think the timing being's further down the pit lane. So when that car rejoins, that's when we'll see that what will be a huge amount of time being registering on the timing and scoring, I would think.
Yeah, I go with that. But also I think because the crash happened at turn 1, so then Tristan Vautier is never going to go through the infield. He's just going to rejoin at turn 6, isn't he? And timekeeping will say, well, that wasn't a lap, so therefore we're not going to count it. And I think you're right.
I think they take a penalty if they miss that, and the bus stop as well. If you bypass the bus stop, you get a penalty.
Well, there used to be a rule at the bus stop that it used to be a rule at the bus stop that if you didn't take it, you then had to come to a halt in the kind of runoff road and then start again.
I think that's still applies, Johnny. Just haven't seen it.
Does it? I thought we'd had years when actually that was scrapped and they went for something else. But what we have got, Joe, is reference that the car came in the pits, so it did trigger the loop at pit entry. But what it's not done is then it's never given us a time, which, as I say, should be about 3 or 4 minutes once Tristan's recovered and then, well, just trawled its way all the way around the infield below the double yellow line. And you're right that if and when that car rejoins, it's going to be, well, 30 minutes possibly for a lap.
All right, I'm not on site and I can't really get a closer view of what happened with that car, but it looked like it got in the middle of the side pod on the left-hand side of the car, which is basically just an area where things are mounted and auxiliaries are mounted. So that's, I'm not going to say an easy repair job, but it's better than being hit in one of the front or rear axles, because then you're damaging suspension, you're damaging drivetrain. If it has just had a clean hit in the side pod, all of that will be needing to be replaced, done. However, it's a massive job because you're talking about the whole floor area, the whole undertray, which attaches to the actual tub underneath the car. And it looked to me as though that's the kind of repair job. So my point is, in saying that, he'll have been able to get that car, Vautier will have been able to get that car at speed around the lap and into the pits. That's probably why we didn't notice it. There wasn't a massive situation where he was limping it back to the pits. He would have been able to get there pretty quickly if all the 4 wheels were pointing in the right direction.
Also, for the Porsche, it's not like hitting one of those DPIs when it's sitting stationary, you know, when you would really feel that. It's a car on the ragged edge, which is just on the very edge of adhesion. So, I mean, they're a bit like billiard balls in that it's not going to take much to pitch it into a spin. It looks like a big impact. Actually, the Wright Motorsport Porsche has been able to continue around for its remaining laps. And you know, I wouldn't say the Mustang sampling DPI is unscathed, but the damage would have been a great deal had it been doing a slower speed. Almost the high speed that you're approaching turn 1 has helped the impact to be less severe. Although I don't really like the smoke/steam which is pouring out of the engine bay on the 5 car, Joe.
Johnny, that's because in that side pod that I mentioned, one of the things that is housed there is one of the radiators. It's a radiator, an oil cooler or whatever. It is a radiator, so you're going to have engine coolant, but you're going to have to detach hoses and have engine coolant all around that area. So that's probably what that steam is. What this situation has done, Johnny, this race is such the Daytona 24 Hours is a race that is you have to win this race. You have to have a 24-hour optimized run. I'm not sure, Jeremy might be able to add to this, but I'm not sure in the modern era we've seen a car soak up a time in the pits where it goes laps down for it then to climb back up. I think for the number 5, we're now going to see a damage limitation run when that car gets back out.
Well, that's right, Joe. I mean, they're going to hope there's only 7 cars in the class, so they're going to have to hope that somebody else has some serious issues as well. Crucially, however, there's a note here from race control, car 5 penalty, incident responsibility with the 16. So according to race control, they've obviously seen the footage, which is, well, it's actually right in front of them. It was down in front of the tower, but it must have been Vautier that was spinning that collected Patrick Long in the number 16 car. So it has been the number 5 car that has been called for that, and he will have to serve a penalty if and when they get that car back underway again. So that penalty has been called, and it is against the number 5 car. In the meantime, Renger van der Zande has come out of the pits. He is now in the lead of the race. So he stayed out 5 extra laps compared to Jimmy Johnson, who made his stop on lap 302. Renger van der Zande came in on 307. He just completed 309, and as a result of being able to stay out on the racetrack with some clean air. Remember, he was right behind the number 48 when the number 48 car got onto the pit lane, and with some clear laps under his belt and a good pit stop for Cadillac Ship Ganassi Racing, Renger van der Zande now leads this race in car number 01.
Really interesting message that from race control. Now, I assume that they have been looking at the angles that we don't get to witness, and there are many extra locked-off CCTV cameras that they have access to. And through the years, they've actually invited me into race control to have a look at those and then be able to describe them to you on the radio a little bit later on. But there must have been an initial bit of contact which then led to the Porsche spinning, and then the secondary bit of contact which I thought had done the damage to the side pod of the 5 car. I can't quite visualise at the moment what would pitch the Porsche into a spin from the 5 to then put the 5 in front of it and then be reverse T-boned by it. But as I say, they've got those extra angles, and I'm sure we'll know the answer to that. And I'm going to have to pay very close attention when I get the chance to describe that incident to you. But it's peculiar, and it goes to explain a very unusual, it turns out not error, from Patrick Long. That would have been it was going to be the date in the diary to note down, but we need not to now. I have to.
Two prototypes being, I'm sure I saw two
here we go.
prototypes being involved in that incident. You'll see the other prototype here. There's the Porsche, and then we've got another prototype, which is the number 6R. That's the number 16. Which car are we on board with there, Johnny?
Well, we're on board with the Porsche, and
16,
I
right.
don't see, ahead of the 16, there is no sight whatsoever of the 5, which tells me the 5 is behind it. So there must be some contact to push the Porsche into a spin, and then the 5's in front of it.
Yeah, you're right.
That is the car that gets collected. So it's bizarre, but there must have been a tag. Maybe it was when they were side by side to put the Porsche into the initial spin, and then the kind of instigator, as in Tristan Vautier, then gets walloped for a second time when the Porsche's out of control.
That would be a
I'd like to see that again,
but
I can tell you what, the number 60 car was embroiled in quite a battle with number 5. The number 60 car got past number 5 car just a couple of laps before that incident. I didn't see the number 60 car in that picture when we saw the replay, but certainly Vautier he had been overtaken. Those two have been having a pretty good battle over the last hour or so. In the previous stint, Cameron in number 60 car was running on an older set of tyres, so he was struggling a little bit for pace and was overtaken by the number 5 car. But now on this most recent stint, he'd been catching up again and had actually overtaken Vautier right just a couple of laps before that incident.
A strange one, certainly, and we're still getting information through from various sources, which I'm reading through as we speak. About the, well, with thanks to Declan Brennan with these messages, talking about, did we, by the way, ever get to the bottom of who was at the wheel of the 16 at the time? Oh, we said Patrick Long, didn't we? Yeah, this was about 10 minutes
and he
ago
came in
and
made a pit stop right afterwards to hand over to whoever's driving the car now, which would be Patrick Long. Okay, fair enough.
I thought you'd said Patrick Long. It's just that Declan Brennan says that, well, I mean, this was 10 minutes ago, so it's about the timing of it as well. But Jan Halen was on board. What are we? 13 minutes ago. And
When
that wasn't
coming
out of the pits, quite possibly, yes. The right Porsche kept going, then pitted after the problem.
Correct.
Correct.
I think we saw the pit stop before we saw the incident, and that's what explains that.
Okay. You
Which
still
is
maintain
EV.
still reckon it was on a lap for the 16?
No, I think probably not. I just think that the incident took place. Then the Porsche came in the pits, and then we saw that the replay of the incident after that had already happened.
Which put it slightly out of sequence in our minds, yeah. So it was the incident that led to the pit stop rather than the other way round. So
I believe.
we can piece these things together, sometimes days after they've happened.
Yes, exactly. Never too late.
Exactly. Thanks, Dex, for the update. Another chance to describe it to you. Right, well, see, there is a prototype there, but it cannot be seen by the 16 car at the point of impact. So it's got to be either behind or alongside the 16 Wright Motorsport car at the point that the initial contact is made. The Porsche is then in a spin.
So there goes Cameron through the picture. Then there's another car, I think it's a GT car.
Lexus,
and then the other two are having their little thing behind it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Curious.
Well, I think there were 2 points of contact. There was the first one that put the Porsche into the spin, and then when the Porsche's out of control, it goes backwards into the side of the 5, which has done all the damage, which is sent it behind the wall. The initial glance between a car, I'm going to say the 5 and the 16, I don't think did a great deal of damage to the 5 or the 16 for that matter, but it was a secondary impact which posed the problem and puts the 5 car behind the wall. That's now tumbled down to 13th position, and the 16 car has actually got away with that relatively unscathed. Now bear in mind, this is a GT3 spec Porsche, so the engine is in the traditional place in this Porsche. It's not like the GT LM car where the engine and the gearbox have been spun through 180 degrees. It sits right at the back of the car, and that was my concern for the 16. The 5 might get away with it because, as Joe was saying, side pods are important aesthetically, and they carry things like radiators and vents and whatnot, but the repair process could be pretty quick. However, you run the risk of massively damaging the engine on this Porsche, but it sounds sweet to me. There it is in the background. Flat 6 is singing for Patrick Long, who took charge of the car after the incident, we think, with Jan Halen at the wheel when it took place. Matteo Cressoni leads this class, car 21, from Corey Lewis in the Paul Miller Lamborghini Huracan, and Aaron Tielitz in the number 14 car is in third, ahead of Zach Robichon and Raffaele Marciello, now driving the Sun Energy 1 Mercedes. So Ferrari, Lamborghini, Lexus, Porsche, Mercedes is the current top 5, and to make it a different manufacturer again in the top 6, Richard Westbrook for TF Sport is there, the Aston Martin brand, car number 97. Renger van der Zande leads the motor race though, 5 minutes past 1 in the morning, and there's a gap of nearly 4 seconds between Renger van der Zande and Jimmy Johnson, with Alexander Rossi of the 10 car ahead of Mike Conway. Busy again out on track for the 16 machine. A chance to see the rear of that car, courtesy, as always, of Rooftop Ray's brilliant camera work, and the rear wing has escaped very nicely indeed on that Wright Motorsport car. I suppose the DPI machines are that low slung, the rear wing has just gone over the top of the 05 car and didn't need to be straightened out at all. So amazing that there'll be a little bit of dentage on the rear of the 16, but it could have been a lot worse for that car, which had been featuring in the top 3. Obviously it's put it quite a way down the order now, but a good result is not out of the equation. Car 16 running now in 11th position with Bill Oberlin to chase Turner Motorsport. The Porsche is already spinning when the proper contact is made with the number 5 car. But there has to have been some initial contact between 5 and 16 for the 5 car to be assessed incident responsibility, and that's the bit we haven't quite caught. Oh, there is damage on the left-hand side of the Porsche, which I haven't spotted actually on the 16 car. So the rear left hind quarter just in front of the rear wheel on the left side is quite badly affected. That may need to be addressed in the next pit stop, probably with some tape and other bits of cable ties. I think David's always a big fan of that. And repair work on the move. Jeremy, let's forget that incident for the moment. We've spoken a lot about it and focus on what's happening then at the sharp end with Renger van der Zande now ahead of Jimmy Johnson, looking to try and extend the gap.
Yes, indeed, and it's staying pretty fairly similar. It's fluctuating just a little bit between Renger van der Zande and Jimmy Johnson, but really not much at all. 3.5 seconds is all it is. Actually, it was 5 seconds on 5 laps to go, so it's actually come down a little bit. Alexander Rossi in third position. He's closed down just a tad, a couple of seconds or so. 10 seconds behind in behind the second place car in third, and then the gap back to Mike Conway in number 31 car has also remained fairly stable as well, around about 28 seconds. And then there's a pretty big gap back to Dane Cameron in the number 60 car. Prior to the last round of pit stop, the gap between the number 31 and the 60 was around about a half a minute. And it's now 36 seconds, so it's actually gone out a little bit. So Cameron told me before the start of the race that the car felt pretty good, but not great. But they thought it was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle in this race. But look, it was still, we're still what, 2.5 hours away from the halfway point in the race. So a long, way too early to draw any sort of meaningful conclusions, I would say.
Oh yeah, totally. When we get to half distance, which will be 3:40 in the morning, you've still got the back 9 to complete. You've still got an awfully long way to go, and just a hint maybe of a pattern developing in the race. Corvette are doing very well so far. They must be elated with the speed that their cars can produce. Only the second year of the development of this car. Looks very much like Jordan Taylor getting on board the number 3 to take over from Antonio Garcia, yes, and the number 4 car, Tommy Milner, has yet to pit, but the 4 car tends to be later than the 3 on the cycle. Jules Gounon in the number 62 Ferrari is back out again for Risi Competizione. And John Edwards rejoining the fray as well in the 24 BMW. Bruno Spengler at the wheel of the 25 car. And it's all about that top 5 really, the factory teams. Although Risi Competizione is sort of a pseudo version of that. The one car that we wanted to be in the mix but isn't at this stage is the WeatherTech Racing Porsche, which had dramas very early on. Sees it circulating in 37th position overall with Kevin Estre at the wheel, looking to try and get ahead of, what's that, 13 GT Daytona cars and the bulk of the LMP3 field as well. So set for quite a bit of recovery there. We're talking 12 laps that car's going to have to try and make up on the rest of the GT LM field. But again, it is a relatively small class, so some dramas up ahead. Could see the Porsche back in contention, even though it'll have to do it from a fairly long distance away. Looking for lengthy problems really for any of those cars ahead of it. But this is good from Corvette. I mean, they had a strong car last year, but it wasn't its debut season, Jeremy. It feels like they've really learned from their opening year with the mid-engine Corvette in the 2020 WeatherTech SportsCar Championship, building on that now.
The Corvettes.
The Corvettes, yeah.
Yes,
Indeed.
the Corvettes, yeah, no, I mean, they had a really strong run here last year. That was the debut for that car, the world debut for the C8R. It was a really strong run. They ended up with, not the finish they wanted, but they finished 4th in the race here 1 year ago. But the car certainly was competitive through most of the race. And as I say, that was pretty much out of the box. So the car, for a debut season, it was a remarkable year last year for that new mid-engine Corvette, and ended up with a deserved championship. But yeah, it was so tight in GTLM last season. The Porsches often had the fastest car, but for one reason or another, they just didn't get the results until right at the end of the year. And the Corvettes, no doubt about it, deserved the championship. But here at Daytona last year and the last 2 years, it's been BMW Team RLL. And even now, we've still got all 5 of those cars in GTLM duking it out amongst each other. Interestingly, the number 4 car has now taken the lead in GTLM. Number 3 car pitted a couple of laps ago. Tom Milner still has not brought that car into the pits. He's completed now 302 laps. He's done now a couple of laps more, or will have done a couple of laps more than the number 3. I would expect the number 4 car to come into the pits next time around, because the other class contenders right behind him have already just made their scheduled pit stops.
Yeah, Tommy's previous completed stint was 33 laps, I noticed, so we could get that far. I don't think that will have included any yellow, because we're far enough clear of the previous yellow period now. 2 hours and 45 minutes nearly. So 33 laps looks to be a goer for the Tommy Milner Corvette, the silver one.
Yeah, it does.
So yes, either at the end of this one or the next one.
Wow.
Strange that, isn't it, that you get slightly better fuel mileage out of one car than the other when they're more or less identical.
Yeah, it is, but then the number 4 car was in the slipstream with the number 3 car pretty much all the way through that last stint. They were sort of separated by probably not much more than a second or so. So when you're in that sort of situation, you often can take advantage of that draft and lift off the gas a lot earlier than you would do otherwise, even if you were saving fuel. So that could be a significant saving. I doubt it's going to be 2 or 3 laps worth, but it certainly could be a lap at least.
Yeah, less air resistance means less fuel being burned, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it all goes together to provide your slight advantage across a race. And we talk about hooking all of these stints together. It seems very, very small advantages with each step of the race, but if you continue to produce that, it can present you with a Rolex by the end of it. Joe Bradley always likes to talk about fuel mileage and tyre management, all of that sort of business, together with getting cars in and out of the pits as quickly as possible. I'm impressed with so few pit stops so far, Joe, from each of the Corvettes actually. Once Tommy Milner comes in for his latest stop, it will only been 10 visits to pit road, whereas the next best is the Ferrari with 12. So it's not just the race on the track, but also so crucial to be quick in the pit lane as well.
It's a high-speed game of chess, guys. I told you ages ago. I always use that analogy. It really is. But just to sort of shed some light as to where he may have gotten that extra lap from, I'll use the example of this. If you finish the stint with, let's say, 0.4 of a lap, not litres, not time, but 0.4 of a lap of fuel in the tank, the next stint you finish with 0.8 of a lap, because finishing with 0.8 of a lap worth of fuel in the tank isn't enough to get you around that lap. It's the next stint where you can grab that extra lap worth of fuel that's in the tank, and that mounts up to be usable eventually. And also, there's no doubt about it that the Corvette guys will be fuel saving. And I think it was last year when I interviewed Scott Dixon, and I asked him that question. And I asked him the question about how do you fuel save, Scott? Because he is the master at it, isn't he? He really is. He's shown his class at this race and in this series, but also in IndyCar, and he's majored in his main drive. And I asked him tentatively, and I thought he wouldn't really tell me. However, his description was so detailed and so eloquent. And if I can summarize it, it's basically, as you get to your braking point, if you're in a sprint race, you would go from a very rapid transition from the throttle pedal to the brake, and you would maximize that and then go straight back onto the throttle. You just basically smooth that transition period completely, and you just lift off the throttle slightly earlier. You're then scrubbing off a little bit of speed, which enables you to then brake later towards the corner. and you are able to then carry the same amount of speed sort of into the corner, mid-corner and out of the corner, but in that phase of throttle transitioning to brake and then going back on the throttle, you smooth that up, and that does amount to an amount of fuel being saved. If your right foot's not smashing the throttle, then you're not using fuel, and that will mount up. It's all, you know, it's all about the mathematics, and it's all about the, you know, the minute savings you can make at every single braking point will eventually mount up to something tangible.
Yeah, well, you make a really good point in that at the end of a stint there's always going to be a little bit of fuel left in the tank that you just cannot get to, and is useless after one stint, but very, very useful after three, because it can all add together. Painting pictures with words is Joe Bradley as part of our VP Racing Fuels Pit and Paddock report, describing that perfectly. Could well be the answer. Well, Tommy Milner's done 33 laps now, so surely has come into the pits at the end of that lap, and yes, he has, because he's handed over to Nick Tandy in the class-leading Corvette. There was only 3.9 seconds between himself and Jordan Taylor, so Jordan will head back into the lead of the race in car number 3, and in 10 pit stops rather completed for the number 4 Corvette. We're back to the phase, therefore, that the 4 will be doing the chasing. Prime opportunity once more to get into the slipstream, save a little bit more fuel, lifting and coasting. Keep our eyes peeled for that, as to whether Nick Tandy can get as far as Tommy Milner's just done on 2 separate occasions. 33 laps is the high benchmark to aim for. Renger van der Zande, meanwhile, on to lap 16 of this stint. Best lap of the stint so far at 1:36.1, but he's more happily at home in mid-37s. Very far away from that, actually. Jimmy Johnson is about a tenth of a second behind on the average times, and further into the stint, Jimmy Johnson, by 5 laps. And with a 48 pits earlier than the 0-1 car, and the 10 in relation to that, it's only 1.8 seconds away from Jimmy Johnson's second place Ally Cadillac racing car. So Rossi working hard in the previous stint to try and chisel away at a 17-second lead. This is much better now for him because he can see the car he's chasing. Every time he comes out of one of the tight corners on the infield, there will be Jimmy Johnson's Cadillac. He can locate the crosshair very easily indeed. LMP3 heading down pit road is the Riley Motorsports Ligier. This car's second now. Well, Jeremy, we talked about the speed that Oliver Askew was able to produce. And his hard work means a place gains during that stint, coming down pit road in second. Moritz Krantz leading the class.
Yeah, it's been a very, very good stint there from Oliver Askew. I think it might have been a double at the wheel of that car. The youngster from Jupiter in Florida was very much a star in the open wheel ranks in the Road to Indy. You see a pit stop now for the second place car. It's Jimmy Johnson bringing that car in. He will hand over most likely to Simon Pagenaud, I would imagine, will be climbing aboard number 48 car. Really good effort there by Jimmy Johnson. He led for a goodly portion, was hanging right there in second position. But the man on the charge, was definitely closing in on Jimmy Johnson as Johnson leaves, as the Johnson car, the Ally Cadillac, leaves the pit lane. Routine service there for the number 48 Ally team. That's part of the Action Express family.
I would agree with you on Simon Pagenaud, because he did stint 3 after a double at the start of the race for Jimmy Johnson. Instantly recognisable 48 car that he has run, I assume, for his whole career. Certainly that font of 48 with the italic bright yellow colours that so often has adorned a NASCAR with his name on the roof, and that race number adopted for the Ally Cadillac machine for this race as well. Outlap for Simon Pagenaud then. Back to the cycle of drivers, which will, well, I guess see a double stint for the Frenchman. Then we might Rockefeller take charge if we follow suit with the order of drivers we've seen so far. And then eventually we'll get back to Kamui Kobayashi. He's pounding out some really impressive lap times. We expect nothing less from the Japanese driver. Great, wouldn't it, to catch up with Jimmy Johnson after that stint. I'm sure Joe and others can attempt to organise that. Give Jimmy a bit of time as well to cool off after an intense couple of stints. Heading out of the West Horseshoe is the second place car of Alexander Rossi, with BMW 25 Bruno Spengler just ahead. Diving now up the inside of that car. The Porsche, the WeatherTech Porsche, was one to be lapped as well. That might well have been a GT Daytona Porsche, actually, judging by the speed that the BMW had over it. So all white Porsche may well have been the 64 car at Speedway Turn 1. Jeremy Shaw.
Yeah, no, that would be the logical explanation, certainly. But the GTD cars are actually pretty quick on the straight line, in a straight line, and there's not much speed differential at all between the GTLMs and the GTDs, remarkably, and all of them are quicker, as we saw briefly from an onboard there, than the LMP3 cars. They can only do about 178 miles an hour, I think, on the straight, the LMP3 cars. That's what they're kind of regulated to. So that, you know, they make their speed mainly through the corners, and we talked about it at the beginning of the race, the propensity perhaps for incidents between the LMP3 cars and particularly the GT traffic, but just leave it at that. You know, it's been pretty clean for the most part so far.
Well, actually,
now for the number 10.
Talk about the WeatherTech Racing Porsche potentially going slowly, but actually that's produced the best lap of the GTLM class full stop. 142.642. Yeah. So sadly its position rather gives us a different story. But that's because of dramas earlier on in the race. It's a very fast race car, that car number 79. It would have been great to have had that in the hunt. It's one of the new RSR 19s that debuted in this particular championship at the start of 2020, 4.2 litre engine in those cars, and I assume WeatherTech have acquired one of the factory Porsches, haven't they? Old factory cars. Yes, says Jeremy. Well, interesting to know whether it was the 911 or the 912 in a previous life. Somebody will know that notes these things down, as the Renger van der Zande Cadillac is on lap 327. Just over a minute's advantage. It's only because Philippe Albuquerque has peeled off to take charge.
Other way around, no. Rossi came into the pits. Rossi came into the pits to hand over to Philippe Albuquerque.
Right, sorry, did I express it in a way? I knew what I meant, probably the words came out on order at this time of the morning. 125.
Comment.
All of the facts and figures were right on my screen, just about my delivery, which question mark next to it. Dave Cameron in third in the 16 car, and Simon Pagenaud running in fourth position. That's what you were bringing about the order there recently. It's still the number 11 car that leads, with now Stephen Thomas driving the Win Autosport blue and silver car with the yellow stripe across the roof line there. Being chased by Mathieu Vaxivière, the Tower Motorsport. There's only 5 seconds between those two now. Vaxivière's last lap around was a 140.6. That was quicker by 0.4 of a second than Stephen Thomas driven car. Andrea Bellicchi kind of still loitering in the background, but it's got about 60 seconds to try and find. So the Cetilar de Lara is, from the perspective of the two leaders, not a distraction. And the 82 in fourth is Eric Lux for the sole surviving Dragon Speed Orica. Remember, 81 hit dramas very early on indeed. It was in fact our first retirement. A moment at the bus stop chicane on the previous lap for the class leader in LMP3, So car number 6 having to take to the grass there. Second class leader because it had the number 1 on the side. Yes, it is. Moritz Kranz for Mülner Motorsports. And that was a lap that was 5 seconds slower than what that car is capable of. So indicative of the grass track moment at the bus stop chicane for Moritz Kranz, the German, who shares that car with Lars Bohr, Jesse Cook, Stephen McAleer. The gentleman we were hearing from earlier on RS2 IMSA Radio, Lance Wilson, and a lengthy chat with him. Great to have him on the broadcast. Jeremy and myself were chatting to him. He's now at the wheel of the Short Creek Motorsport car. Oliver Askew staying at the wheel of the 74. Pit stop puts it back down to 3rd position for the Riley Motorsports car. He is going much quicker than those 2 cars up ahead, so see that 30-second gap evaporating very quickly. And we'll have a really good battle for, first of all, second, and then quite possibly the lead of the class as well, judging by Askew's current speed.
He was shown in second place because Lance Wilson had already made a stop at that stage. So 3rd is where he has been running now for quite a long time in that number 74 car for Riley Motorsports. But, you know, Moritz Kranz there with that off. Moritz Kranz, by the way, boy, he and Lawrence Herr were massively impressive last weekend. They dominated, absolutely crushed everybody else in the first round of this year's Michelin Prototype Challenge Series here at Daytona. They just ran off the head basically, but they're certainly having a harder run of it here this afternoon. But Moritz Kranz, this is his first race in the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship, but he did race here at Daytona. He drove a Porsche Cayman GT4 car 2 or 3 years ago in the Michelin Pilot Challenge race, so he does have experience around here already. And it's made very, very good use of that, but he's still off them. He's still got a handy lead. It was around about 50 seconds over the number 30, excuse me, yes, over the number 33 car. They completed another lap since then. It's about the same actually, 55. No, I think he's not yet completed this next lap, so we'll have to wait and see what that gap is next time around. But the gap from number 33 to the number 74, about, it's now 31 seconds I think between the number 33 and the number 74.
It's interesting you say he's raced at Daytona before. I've got him racing at Road America in 2017 in a Porsche Cayman, so that will have been, yeah, GT4 car, so that will have been the Michelin Pilot Challenge, or what it was called in those days, 4 years ago. Haven't got down on the notes that he raced at Daytona, so interesting that you raised that. And useful track knowledge.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, well, we can check. Anyway,
it out.
but it was a Mülner Motorsport America entered car. He raced with Gabriele Piana in a Porsche Cayman GT4. Piana, I know from his vast experience around the Nürburgring Nordschleife GT3 cars. But Moritz Kranz, a regular, or has been in the last few years, in the Michelin Le Mans Cup that runs in Europe, on the support bill to the European Le Mans Series, and kind of is Mülner Motorsport, or very, very strong ties with that outfit, regularly racing with them, as he is indeed doing this weekend. Car peeling off to driver's left is the number 9 car for Lars Kern, so that's the 4th place Pfaff Motorsports Porsche heading into the pits, just as the Ally Cadillac car of Simon Pagenaud zips by into the tri-oval, and the Dane Cameron driven Meyer-Shank Racing Acura is into pit road. It's only when the cars are stationary you get to really be mesmerised by the paint schemes that are utilised for this particular championship year. I hope these are not Daytona specials, as it were, and how these cars are going to look for the rest of the year, but certainly a lot of money has been spent on just the design of these machines, and it is glinting in the floodlights as that car now leaves pit road with the Sirius XM sponsorship on the dorsal fin. Your mind was playing tricks, was it? Well, I can't rely on my mind playing tricks. That was purely from archives that I just managed to look up. But so it was a Road American trip rather than a visit to Daytona for Moritz Krantz.
Indeed it was.
I'll let you off. It was 4 years ago. Through the bus stop chicane goes the number 60, taking charge now of that machine, Olivier Clark. K-Max back at the wheel of the 0-1. 330 laps completed. Record, by the way, record distance. Those with shortish memories might even be able to recall that it was last year that we hit a record distance in this particular race of 833 laps. 2,965.5 miles for the Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac of Ryan Briscoe, Scott Dixon, Kamui Kobayashi, Renger van der Zande. I would say at this stage, Jeremy, 833 or even 834 is a stretch. I think already we've had too many full-course yellows to get there.
Yeah, I think so.
But there we are. I mean, we had did we not have back-to-back race distances? Oh no, the previous year, 2019, was the rain-affected one, wasn't it? So that certainly wasn't a record distance. So do you remember we've had maybe 2 of them in the last 3 years? Off-track moments now. Was that the 6 a few laps ago? Yes, it was, at the bus stop chicane, hitting the grass on the inside of the bus stop and also on that loop coming out as well. So the delay that we mentioned at the time for Moritz Krantz, that much talked about Moritz Krantz now, but he did hang on to the class lead. Oliver Askew, 30 seconds becomes 20 seconds, in fact 19 seconds now in his chase to hunt down Lance Wilsey. So that is going very much in the favour of the Jupiter man, in 3rd place in car 74.
Yeah, although actually Moritz Krantz has set the best lap of the race in LMP3. In terms of 1:43.485, that was way back on lap 4, right at the beginning of the race. Scott Andrews has set the best lap in the number 74 car. That was lap 186. And Oliver Askew just completed lap 307 in that 3rd place car, car 74. But Askew was, as I was saying a little while ago, he was a standout in the overall ranks, moving up through the road to Indy. He won the USF 2000 championship. Actually, won a whole bunch of scholarships to get up to his opportunity last year. Won USF 2000, finished 3rd in the Indy Pro 2000 championship. Won the Indy Lights championship in 2019, and earned him cool $1 million to take towards an IndyCar ride from last year, which is secured supposedly in a long-term deal. Was that going off the road there at the bus stop?
It's Moritz Krantz again.
I think it was a replay again. That secured him the ride with the McLaren, the Spam team. Aaron McLaren, excuse me, Schmidt-Peterson. And it's supposed to be a long-term deal, but for some reason they let him go towards the end of last season, which I thought was a really bizarre decision, because from my perspective, Askew did a really good job last year. He and Pato O'Ward were a really good combination, 2 young drivers for the future of the sport. But Askew, he had a couple of crashes, for sure, which you're going to have as a rookie at that level, but he was competitive, had a podium finish, but unfortunately had a big crash in Indianapolis and ended up receiving a concussion, which kind of went undiagnosed for a couple of races. And shortly after that, he was told his services wouldn't be required for this year, which was a tremendous shame, I think, for the sport, amongst anything else, because he is a super talented driver, actually. And hats off here to the Riley Motorsports team, and Gar Robinson in particular, and Bill Riley for picking him up, giving him this opportunity to drive in the sports car ranks, and he's having a fine performance now. He's now within 16 seconds of Lance Wilsey as he tries to make up ground on the leaders. Currently running his 3rd place. That's Oliver Askew in car number 74 in LMP3.
Pretty sure I remember interviewing Oliver when he came to the UK. He was run by Cliff Dempsey Racing as part of the Team USA scholarship. I can't remember the name of the guy that runs that now, but that would have been 5 years ago, I think, 2016. But I remember him coming to the UK, and we got him into the studio, and really, I got to know him, but you get a feel for one's character, even in a sort of 10-minute interview, and a thoroughly nice young man he was in those days, and amazing that we're now 5 years on from that, but still no slower once he gets behind the wheel of a race car. Yes, certainly does. Gets quicker with every day, I find.
Yeah.
Kevin Magnussen continues to lead the race at lap 3:33 now completed, and he's got a lead of 6 seconds over Philippe Albuquerque, the relatively new name back into the number 10 Konica Minolta Acura. Simon Pagenaud and Mike Conway also in Cadillac. Some sort of drama a minute or two ago for Philippe Albuquerque, who came out of the... Oh no, big pardon, we're back to live pictures now, having revisited a moment or two ago in the garage for the number 10. So that was probably back into their stock. All seems to be under control for Wayne Taylor Racing and the Konica Minolta car. 21 is still the GT Daytona race leader. And of course, a Ferrari now in the hands of Simon Mann. Matteo Cressoni was in charge of the previous stint, and I think it was in the hands of the Italian that car took the lead and then looked to extend it. So a really good drive from the likeable Italian. This is the next stint that Simon Mann did do, stint 2 and 3. The second one very close to the race start, was over 14 laps. He then had a much meatier one at 27, and then since then had a one-off stint to separate Cressoni to Daniel Serra, sort of in the stint in a quarter, and then we've had Nielsen and Cressoni back in again for 30-odd lap stints. So this will be another long one, I wager, for Simon Mann, towards the 30-lap phase. So just getting settled in now, and his job is to try and hang on to the lead as best he can. 17 seconds as a cushion back to Aaron Telitz, the second place GT Daytona car, which is the first of the Lexus machines from Vasser Sullivan, car 14. It's got really very much for company. Telitz has got Corey Lewis all over the back of him in the Paul Miller Racing Lamborghini Huracan, so 14 and 1 could be set to change any moment. Last time around, marginally faster for Telitz actually. Trying to work out which way that's gone. Is that Telitz having just overtaken Lewis, do we think, or is Lewis doing the catching there in GT Daytona, second and third?
Don't know.
No, that's all right. The lap chart is very, very detailed. Sometimes
just need a
GT Daytona action. Go on.
Pit of the leader in LMP2, Stephen Thomas, has just brought the Win Motorsport car number 11 into the pits. It was a super stint by Stephen. That was the end of the first of a triple stint for Stephen Thomas. So he's just given up the lead now to the number 8 car, which will go back into the... It's just been a seesaw battle between number 8 and number 11 now for quite a long time. The Tower Motorsport by Starworks entry leads at the moment. Mathieu Vazivière at the wheel of the number 8 car. Stephen Thomas, so I think, will resume most likely in second place, and Andrea Bellicchi has also just made a pit stop in the third place LMP2 car number 47, and I think all those 3 cars were on the lead lap. And then Eric Lux in number 82, Dwight Merriman in the number 18 car, both 1 lap off the ultimate pace in LMP2.
You're tuned to RS2 IMSA Radio. That's Jeremy Shaw and I'm Johnny Palmer, and we are both in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, also joined by Joe Bradley, who's looking after the VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock reports. And it is time now, with another hour of the race done, 10 completed already, for the Mazda in-race update, which is as follows. Kevin Magnussen leads the race in the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac. by 9.4 seconds over the chasing Konica Minolta Acura of Philippe Albuquerque, car 10. Simon Pagenaud is third for Ally Cadillac Racing in another Caddy DPI, car 48, and Mike Conway in a similar machine, this time run by Whelen Engineering Racing, the red and white car with the instantly recognisable number 31 on its flanks. 60 car for Olivier Plar is Meyer Shank Racing and another Acura, and in 6th place the 55 Harry Tinknell driven Mazda DPI from Mazda Motorsports. Then we're into a bank of 6 LMP2 cars led by Mathieu Vaxivière then for Tower Motorsport, having got ahead, that's in the number 8 car, and he's got ahead of car 11 Stephen Thomas for Win Autosport. Giorgio Cernigiotto for Cetala Racing is third in the only Dallara in the entry, car number 47, the only Dallara in LMP2. Eric Lux, having made that stop, or making that stop, looks like he's going to rejoin in 4th or 5th places for the low Dragon Speed car. Eric staying at the wheel, that just flashes up on my screen now as he heads back into the motor race. GTLM, all about the 5 cars of, well, the 2 Corvettes, the 2 BMWs, and the Risi Competizione Ferrari. Nick Tandy leads the class with car 4, the silver Corvette, from the sister machine of Jordan Taylor, number 3. Jules Gounon is next in the red Ferrari from Risi, and then the 2 BMWs, John Edwards ahead of Bruno Spengler. Kevin Estre is still running, but when you consider the 5th place GTLM car is 17th overall, the 6th placed car in that class is sadly way down in 34th position after a couple of dramas in the early phases. LMP3 led by Moritz Krantz, despite a slight off-track moment at the bus stop chicane for the Mulder Motorsports Duquesne D08 for the German driver. That's car 6. He is in front of Lance Wilsey and Oliver Askew, but Askew's got the gap down to just 0.4 of a second now to Lance Wilsey. So change for second place is very much afoot, and in GT Daytona the 21 car is leading in it. There are still 18 running, and the AF Corsa 21 car is driven by Simon Mann and has a lead of 15 seconds over Aaron Thielitz in the 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. Then it's Corey Lewis and the Lamborghini Huracan of Paul Miller Racing, last year's winners, running with the number one on the doors. Lars Kern is 4th in the number 9 Pfaff Motorsports Porsche, and in 5th place Italian driver Raffaele Marciello for Sun Energy One in a Mercedes car 75 is 5th. Those are your Mazda in-race positions, and this is RS2 IMSA Radio for 2021. The 59th edition of the great Rolex 24 of Daytona. Johnny Palmer and Jeremy Shaw in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, bringing you live coverage at IMSARadio.com, and if you head to the live video tab on IMSARadio.com, you can enjoy not only our dulcet tones but also the visuals perfectly synced up, and the stellar work from Rooftop Ray, who is hard at work. It's a reduced crowd, but they have allowed Ray to be at the 24 Hours of Daytona, and we couldn't do this segment of the race without him providing great footage on IMSARadio.com of the GTLM battle right now, which involves Nick Tandy. He has the number 1 illuminated on the side of his number 4 Corvette, and well, the adjustment from a Porsche to a Corvette seems to have been taken in the Bedfordshire man's stride, and I expected nothing less, really, Jeremy Shaw.
Equating Nick Tandy's name to a Corvette, I must admit, but you know, he's settled in there really quickly, as you suggested. I mean, you know, he's a pretty good team player, is Nick, and he's settled in there right away. Both he and Alexander Sims, who's joined this team as well, 2 very good additions, I think, for Corvette racing, and you know, it's the success for Corvette racing, I think, is just going to continue this year. Certainly miss seeing Oliver Gavin not driving a Corvette, but it's certainly been great to see Oliver instead driving for the Vassar Sullivan Lexus team this weekend, and has had a goodly portion of this race in the lead of the class as well. The car he shares in this race with Jack Hawksworth and Aaron Thielitz has been they've had a really good run so far, and the car is currently in the second position. And Carl Coker is the fourth driver, number 14 car, currently running in second position behind, as you were saying a little while ago, Simon Mann. Just a dozen seconds between those two at the moment. And Corey Lewis is right there in third place as well in the Lamborghini. And Johnny, you were saying earlier on about the different manufacturers involved there. Right now the order is Ferrari, Lexus, Lamborghini, Porsche and Mercedes. That's the two Mercedes is in fifth and sixth. And then the best the Aston Martins, which now has Ben Keating, who has, I think, probably completed his duties in the LMP2 car, perhaps, or certainly most of it, and he's now taking the wheel of the TF Racing Aston Martin, running in the 7th position in GTD. That's car number 97.
Yeah, I'm always mightily impressed with the various combinations that you get in the top 5, but I mean, that's the beauty of GT Daytona, in the sense that we've got so many different manufacturers represented. Those that aren't featuring in the top 6, for example, at the Turner Motorsport BMW, it would be great to have that one towards the top 10. It's 13th at the moment, so that's definitely within its grasp. And Aidan Reed piloting the 96 BMW. Also the Acura, that we're not mentioning a great deal about, but purely because it has had its struggles in the opening exchanges, but there is opportunity yet for things to improve for the Magnus with Archangel Acura being driven by Andy Lally. And then another manufacturer, the Audi R8 LMS of NTE Sport, and car 42 has JR Hildebrand at the wheel of that. So just a massive amount of manufacturers represented in GT Daytona. An example really of how strong GT3 is as a class, not only globally, but I think particularly so in this championship, the WeatherTech SportsCar Championship, where so many there are other areas of motorsport where there's a number of chassis that you can choose from, but often teams will go with the obvious strongest one, and sadly you get a sort of polarization of maybe two different favoured manufacturers. That's not the case in GT Daytona, because presumably they've got the balance of performance bang on right, and therefore you choose your weapon, you pay your money, you take your choice. And again, we have a very varied field, just as it has been for the last number of years in GT Daytona. So Ferrari leading by 11 odd seconds, but Aaron Telitz with the opportunity to try and close that gap. It was Telitz, by the way, getting ahead of Corey Lewis, posing that question a little while ago. But again, with thanks to Declan Brennan, who is paying close attention to GT Daytona this weekend. And it was the Lexus getting ahead of the Lamborghini, but not really making that much of a break in second position as things stand. Hearing the Corvette number 3 in the background, and just pulling through the gears is Jordan Taylor, relaxing into another lengthy stint of 32 laps there or thereabouts. He took over from Antonio Garcia at the start of this stint, so it's likely to be a double for Jordan, probably for 32 laps each. But as mentioned, the sister car in Tandy, certainly the hands of Tommy Milner, will go 1 lap longer than that. Fortunes reversed, in the sense that we're wondering whether Tommy was able to get that extra fuel mileage because he was in the draft of the number 3. That's not the case in this stint though. It's Tandy ahead of Taylor, so maybe we're in store for the 3 car to get some of that mileage advantage back again. That's Jules Gounon doing in 3rd position. Last time set a 1:45.8, which isn't the sort of speed that the Corvettes are doing. So if anything, that 15-second gap is growing, but only very slightly lap on lap. The BMW of John Edwards last time was able to lap much quicker than the Ferrari. That was only 2 laps in isolation, I appreciate. But over 2 seconds gained there by John Edwards. If that pattern continues to play out, we'll have a scrap on our hands in the next few laps between Gounon and John Edwards. I was posing the question many hours ago now as to whether this might be the first race that Jules Gounon had competed in a Ferrari. Well, no, because you don't need that long of a memory to recall 24 Hours of Le Mans 2019, when he was at the wheel of a Ferrari GTE car. We have a problem at the bus stop chicane with a Lexus stopped on the exit. It's on driver's left and dead stick there. We're going to go caution because of this. Now, is that Aaron Tielitz's car? No, it's the other machine. It's the 12, in fact, of Frankie Montecalvo. So down in 17th position, sadly, for this car. And another fire, Jeremy Shaw. Now, that is exactly where the exhaust is on one of these Lexus, I believe, right behind the front wheel. But I don't like the look of the flames licking there. And very sensibly indeed, Frankie's going to get out of that car before any more of it starts to go up.
Yeah, not sure whether that is a grass fire there or whether it is coming out of the car itself. But whatever it is, it certainly isn't good news. And it's been a troubled day for that number 12 team. They've had all sorts of problems during this race. They had some frontal damage early on. You saw the car, I think, ran off the road, I think, and then go to the bus stop at one stage as well. So they're quite a long way off the pace, and it looks like this might be the end of the day for them. But this is finally going to bring out another caution period then. But it's been nearly better part of 3.5 hours, hasn't it, since we were lost, since we went back to green.
3 hours 21 minutes and 54 seconds exact. So yes, very good caution agreed.
6 full course caution.
So what led up to this moment? There is a lick of flame anyway from the Lexus. Now, was this earlier on in the lap? That is definitely Lexus number 12, which didn't get anywhere close to the bus stop, Jeremy. It's actually arriving into the bus stop well off on the driver's left on the back straight. There's a massive amount of asphalt there, which serves as runoff if you get a monster crash on the back straight. But clearly Frankie Montecalvo could sense a problem well before the turning point for the bus stop, because he is several car widths over to the left hand side and touring its way towards the bus stop, and then he actually made his way back to the track just about before finally the car cried enough. But it looked like both exhausts were spitting flames, and the left bank has, as you say, just started to set fire to the grass, if anything. And Frankie, as he clambered out, just tried to put that out with his race boot. He didn't want to get too close to the fire in case it really took hold. But the marshals very, very close indeed to the scene. The corner workers in their rescue unit got there quickly with the right fire extinguisher and eliminated the problem very quickly. So very little damage done, I would suggest, to the 12 by the fire. However, the damage may have already been done to the internals, and we'll only get to find out. Well, Vassar Sullivan will only get to find out when the car is returned to the garage. But yeah, the door number will be somewhat scalded because of that. And thankfully, whether that was the spotter on the radio to Frankie Montecalvo or maybe some signals from nearby corner workers, the message got through to him to say best place is out of the car rather than inside trying to get it restarted. So a 19-car field may be down to 17 runners now, but otherwise attrition has not been high. It is, I'm pleased to say, in GT Daytona to this point. The GRT Grasser Racing Lamborghini Huracan no longer running. Frank Pereira last at the wheel of that, and now a problem for the Frankie Montecalvo, Robert McGuinness, Townsend Bell and Zach Veach. Bayshore sponsored number 12 machine, the Lexus RCF GT3. 13 hours and 45 minutes still to go. That means 10 hours and 15 done. And it is coming up to 2 a.m. on the eastern seaboard of the US, in this historic venue of the Daytona Motor Speedway in Florida, for the annual start to the year of the WeatherTech SportsCar Championship, the biggest race of the year, certainly the longest. Round 1, which will deliver times 10 points year on year. No longer is it 35, which is actually what you got for getting pole position in last weekend's race, but 350 points on offer for this opening race proper of the season. Last week, this is an interesting debate, and maybe not the time to start it, Jeremy, but we did have a race last weekend, although for many, I think including yourself, not actually detailed as a race. Did the 31 achieve a race win last weekend?
I'm still waiting to hear on that one. I raised that question with IMSA last week, and they'll get back to me. Well, they haven't yet.
Okay.
So in my book, no, quite frankly, it wasn't a championship points paying round. You did get championship points for scoring a good pole position, admittedly, and that's why I posed the question. But for me, no, I don't think it does. It wasn't a full championship round, so no, I don't think it does count for a race win. The question is, what counts for the pole? So, do you get a pole for winning that race? I don't know. So, and how many drivers are credited with the pole position? So I've asked those questions, and as I say, I haven't yet received a definitive answer from IMSA. I mean, it's IMSA's championship, so they can make the rules as they see fit. Is the way I looked upon that one.
Well, it's not entirely, well, it's certainly not unknown to have more than one driver as a pole sitter, because the WEC, although they're going to be heading away from that system now, but in the past few years we've had two drivers that needed to qualify the car. Without the two drivers, it wasn't qualified. But I agree, this is somewhat of a grey area, isn't it, last weekend? I mean, this is round one of the championship. The 24 Hours of Daytona is round one. And therefore, you would think at the end of this, we will have our first race winner of the season. But we also had a race last weekend to determine the grid. Well, as you say, it's IMSA's say-so. So we'll await that email. And you can tell me what they say once it arrives.
Yes.
Just a couple of minutes away from the top of another clock hour. And as I say, it'll be the hour of 2 a.m. An hour and 40 away, therefore, from half distance. We're clearly far enough away from the previous caution for this to be the full dose of pit stops. It should be a relatively quick recovery, I would suggest, for the Lexus. All four wheels were pointing in the right direction. They're obviously going to be reasonably careful when they tow that car down beneath the double yellow line, though, making sure the fire is out, basically, and there's not any pesky flames still actually lit underneath the car as it moves. But I think predominantly that was coming from the exhaust, which sits a couple of inches above road level. So once that is out, the unburned fuel is extinguished, they can safely move that car, I would hope, and it'll be straight to the garage then, where Vassar Sullivan can assess what they need to do, if it's worth doing it. I mean, there are other drivers that clearly want to take part in this race, and well over half of it still to go, so it would be great if they could return to the race. It rather takes it out of contention. Not that it was particularly in contention prior to the incident, because it does seem like that side of the garage at Vassar Sullivan has had all the bad luck, and the 14 car things are going very sweetly indeed, Jeremy.
That's exactly right, Johnny. And last year the number 14 car had a tremendous season. They ended up winning the Sprint Cup Championship for GTD, which was just shorter races, and they were very much in contention to win the overall GTD Championship as well, until they just had, well, everything that could possibly go wrong, plus various other things as well, from the last couple of races. So it just had a horrible end to the year, and ended up fourth in points rather than challenging for the lead. And quite a long way off the lead, but still, it still was a great season. But this year they want to get it off on the right foot, and that the Vassar Sullivan Lexus team certainly came into Daytona with pretty high expectations. They know their car is fast on all sorts of different types of tracks now. One of its Achilles heels was always looking after its tyres, but they've improved that massively over the years, as we see pit stops now under caution for our race leaders.
Also noted, though, is that in the 28 car, Billy Johnson's come in for some emergency service for Allegra Motorsports, because it's not the turn of GT Daytona yet. It's the prototypes first, but that car has had to come in. It's been in the pits for a little while now, so that suggests that actually Billy Johnson's gone behind the wall in his number 28 Mercedes. You're only allowed is it one tyre to be changed if you feel that that's punctured, either slowly or more rapidly, and you're allowed 5 seconds of the fuel nozzle to be attached if you're short on fuel, just to get you those extra few miles to the window where the pit lane is open. But that 28 car is still in the pit, so there's a concern there, as 5 of the 6 DPIs that the sharp end of this race come in. The one that didn't was Harry Ticknell, the Mazda 55, but otherwise K-Mag did 0-1, and Pla and Albuquerque and Pagenaud and Conway all down pit road, Jeremy Shaw.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that the number 55 car was lapped down, has been for a long, long time, and by staying out now, they will move ahead of all these cars that are now pitted as they're all lined up behind the safety car. Then, before we go back to green, those cars are trapped in between the safety car and the class leader, i.e. in this case the overall leader, will be allowed to go past the safety car and run around to the back of the pack. And while he's running around to the back of the pack, then is the time for the 55 car to make his pit stop, get out again before the rest of the pack comes around, and hey presto, he's back on the lead lap and back in the race. The team had an opportunity to do that several hours ago, but there was a miscommunication between the pit wall and the driver, and he came in a lap too soon. So since then, they've remained that 1 lap down. This finally now will give them an opportunity to get back onto the lead lap and back in the mix again.
We're obviously at the point in the race as well, Jeremy, that the team's feeling the need for a brake change, because that was being done on the 48 car, I believe, or was it the 60? No, it was definitely a Cadillac that was having brakes changed. So the Ally Cadillac racing machine, I believe, was having at least front brakes done. It's still on pit road having that work done. And yeah, it is definitely the Ally car. Front brakes, quite possibly rears as well. So this is going to be a longer stop because of that, but it's work that obviously the team needed to do at some stage. And even though we're an hour and 40 away from half distance, they're clearly happy to do it slightly earlier rather than later. The 28 car's still in pit road. Oh, and finally has rejoined now with Maximilian Buch at the wheel for Allegra Motorsport. So they've done a driver change as well. You can't do that, can you, during the phase of this stage of pit stops, because we're not at the point where GT Daytona can legally pit. And Aaron Tielitz from second place has come in as well in the 14 car before everybody else in GT. So 1 or 2 having to stop well out of the window here, as now the flood of GT LM cars reach pit road, led by the class leader Nick Tandy. Right on his tail is his teammate Jordan Taylor, and Jules Gounon, John Edwards and Bruno Spengler will all trigger the pit entry loop, as does the MAN-driven AF Corsa, the Kerr-driven Pfaff Motorsport Porsche, the Corey Lewis Formula Racing Lamborghini Huracan, and everybody else pretty much in GT Daytona as well. But definitely firm question marks alongside the name of Aaron Tielitz in his 14 Lexus, Jeremy, and the 28 car that's just done a driver change.
Was that a question?
It was more of a... What is the 28
Sounds like a statement, that wasn't, I didn't hear the question.
Well, it's about, I'm concerned about 28. Why are they doing a driver change well before the GT Daytona window opens? You could do emergency service, but Billy Johnson's handed over to Maxi Buch. I'm confused as to why. Or Buch's back in the pit lane now. Or is that to serve a penalty straight away? Or is he coming to do more of a pit stop? I don't know. There's something awry with Allegra Motorsports, and likewise for Aaron Tielitz, who should not have pitted at the point that he did. He came in from second place, a lap before everybody else in GT Daytona, and that put him... We were talking about all the bad luck being soaked up by the 12 Lexus. I'm afraid the 14 is about to get a dose of it as well.
Well, was that for emergency service?
Quite possibly, but it's taken too long. I don't think this is another pit stop for Tielitz. I think this is still the first one. And you would have expected Tielitz to have rejoined at this stage. So there are, as I say, question marks next to Allegra Motorsports and Vassar Sullivan. they may have been forced into this, and we don't know the full detail as yet. This is obviously an opportunity for lots of teams to do breaks, by the way, because the 25 BMW is having its certainly pads changed, and quite possibly rotors as well. You would do the two at the same time, you feel, because pads and rotors, discs in Europe are matched, and are matched at the start of the week. Joe Bradley, who's been hunting around for drivers that are awake at this time of night, probably hitting a little bit of a dead end there. So Joe's going to be rejoining us in a moment for some VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock reports. But first of all, I think Jeremy Shaw had a quick thought for us as we continue this caution.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to find out what happened to the number 14 car, but there's just looking at the positions there, really, the number 60 car got out slightly ahead of the number 31 during this round of pit stops, primarily because he would have needed less fuel. The number 60 car on the last round of pit stops came in 7 laps later than the number 31 car. Remember, the 31 car has been off sequence for quite a long time. So that shorter pit stop has enabled Olivier Pla to move ahead of Mike Conway, and then behind both of them now is the number 48 car with Simon Pagenaud still aboard. That car just made that complete brake change, so that's fine. You know, they break some margin on these cars, so it certainly makes sense to take the opportunity as full course caution, get that brake change done. You can do it without losing a lap, which is mighty impressive. Certainly couldn't do that in the old days. And get back out there, and he's lost a position or two, a couple of positions, but that's about it. So you know, good strategy, I think, certainly from that team. And the number 55 car will be able, has not yet stopped because they haven't yet done the final pass around, but that car should come into the pit shortly just for hopefully routine service and be back on the lead lap. But it's still Kevin Magnussen that will lead under this caution period for Ganassi Racing.
We're almost 10.5 hours in now to the 59th running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. You'll tune to RS2 IMSA Radio, and this is the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre with Jeremy Shaw and Johnny Palmer, and providing VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock reports. Joe Bradley, obviously teams, Joe, have thought we'll have to do breaks at some stage, and this caution is as good a time as any, roughly half distance.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. It's ideal time to soak up the time that it takes to change brake rotors sometime during this race, and during what looks like to be a relatively lengthy caution period. That's the perfect time to do it. It's quite simple, isn't it? As the cars tootle round the track, whilst your car is static on the pit lane, you're losing less track time. So this is what the teams have been looking to do, and now pretty much spot on. It's just past 2 a.m. in the morning, and now would be as good a time as any to do that. We will continue to try and get some VP Fuels driver interviews as we go through the night, but now that we're into the night, drivers, it's a very straightforward process. When drivers get out of the cars, they very, very quickly need to get their head down and get some shut-eye, because they're on limited sleep like we all are, and they'll be very quickly getting taking on a few more hydration, some hydration drinks, a little bit of weight, a massage to get those stiff muscles, having just been in the tight confines of a race car. Even GT cars are a bit of a squeeze. Some people, they'll get a massage and then they'll get to bed as quickly as possible. And then, if we can, we'll squeeze in a bit of a chat to us to get some insight, and we'll continue to try and get some drivers to talk to.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Yeah, this period almost certainly reserved for rest, because we're 2:10 in the morning now, local, an hour and a half away from the half distance mark, and drivers that aren't necessarily scheduled for a drive in the early hours of the, well, later on this morning will be rising for breakfast anyway, to just try and get a little bit of pattern back to their day. But if you're lucky enough to have the night off, or a few hours off in the night, they'll be back in their homes now enjoying that. Battle for the race lead, round the outside as we go back to green. It's two abreast for the first couple of cars, and for third and fourth as well, and there is a lead change there as Philippe Albuquerque wasting no time at all going outside of Kevin Magnussen. Welcome to the Rolex 24 at Daytona, K-Mag, but he's on the fight back, isn't he? On the way out of the right-hander at the International Horseshoe. Albuquerque just about with the lead, and I don't think Kevin Magnussen was going to try anything risky up the inside of that little kink, and now he's in danger of losing second position, this time to Simon Pagenaud, who is no slouch at restarts. Pagenaud has already got ahead of Olivier Pla, who is right on their tail in his Acura. So all change in the top 5 positions pretty much. Pipa Dirani is also taking a watching brief in the 31 car for the Whelen Engineering Racing crew. Desperate to try and get a bit more tyre temperature into their Michelin tyres. All 5 cars showing hints of a little bit of a zigzag through Speedway Turn 2. But a great restart from Philippe Albuquerque. He wasn't going to be asked twice to pull off that manoeuvre. Round the outside, which then gave him the inside line for the second element at 2A, and darts in front of Kevin Magnussen. So Albuquerque, Magnussen, Pagenaud, Pla and Dirani is your new order in DPI. Harry Tincknell, though, to the pits, and was that the wrong side of the caution? We talked about Tincknell trying to, wanting that lap back, quite obviously, as the battling continues down into turns 1 and 2. Kevin Magnussen not quite getting up to speed as quickly as those cars behind him. He's being hassled and harangued by Simon Pagenaud, whose front brake rotors are glowing red hot as they charge their way into the International Horseshoe. There is a Ferrari, the 62 Risi Competizione Ferrari, to nip by now. And the all-important thing is, can you get ahead just before the kink, or just after the kink at turn 4? Some of these DPIs did that, others had to bide their time, and that will drive a bit of a wedge between these 5 leading DPI cars. We'll head to Joe Bradley for a VP Racing update, Racing Fuels update, and then to Jeremy Shaw straight after. Joe, first.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying there, Johnny. It looked to me as though Magnussen's tyres just hadn't quite switched on. Albuquerque's tyres very much so had, and just look at that lead that he's extended to 7/10 there across the line, and you can see the way Albuquerque's car was so neutral in the corner, whereas K-Mag, he was fighting it all the way. So now you'll see that by 0-1, the Cadillac Ganassi racing car, we'll see those tyres coming on now, and we'll see that car settling down. But isn't it fantastic, with what, 13 and a half hours to go in this race, and these guys are still racing off a yellow into a green as if it's a 10-lap sprint. That's what this race is all about.
And that's the beauty, Jeremy, of this type of racing. When you get a safety car, you get a caution, everything concertines up, and the race is more or less reset.
Brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant, yeah. And we've had all sorts of changes of position here. We've got Scott Andrews, who's taken over the wheel of the number 74 car. He has just moved past Moritz Kranz into the lead of LMP3. That's 18th overall. More significantly, though, by a long way in the overall lead, the overall battle, Harry Tincknell came in, as I suggested, after getting the wave around to make his pit stop. He should have been back on the lead lap. However, a problem with the tail section on that car has cost them a lot of ground, and they're now, I think, 3 laps behind. I think Tincknell is back underway again, but that pit stop 6 minutes and 50 seconds that lap, so better part of a well over 5-minute pit stop. That is very, very costly. Really bad luck for the Mazda team. I mean, it looks finally like they were going to get back right into contention. Not the case, unfortunately. Also during that pit stop sequence, number 31 car came back in again right before we went back to green. Not quite sure why, because I think pretty sure he came in with everybody else. It was great timing from number 31 car. He was just about due for a pit stop in any case before that caution period, but not quite sure what happened to force the team to bring him in once again before they went back to green flag racing.
Okay, you get the feeling that there's quite a lot that's happened over the last caution, which was nearly 20 minutes, and now into the green as well. You can entirely see what the 55's aim was out of that, to get the lap back again, but they did bank on the issue with the rear deck, which then had to be addressed. And well, really up against it now. Another recovery drive required for Harry Tinkley. He stayed ahead of all the LMP2s, so that's something. But as Jeremy says, 3 laps down from Philippe Albuquerque, and in fact everybody else in DPI, or certainly DPI contention. We do still have Tristan Vautier in the race, incidentally. And if you're enjoying not only our coverage on radio, but also via IMSARadio.com, clicking on the live video tab, you'll be able to see the visuals as well, perfectly synced with our commentary. And the guy with the rear deck just wants to put that back on the car, but there are complications with 2 mechanics with head torches on, 3 mechanics actually with the head torches, trying to sort out the issue there. Joe, what is on that point of the car that needed so much work? Was it just the fact that it wouldn't attach properly, that rear deck?
Well, it might have been, Johnny, that they had to get the wiring connections for the rear lights. So as that rear wing deck goes on, it attaches to the rear of the car, which is basically the bodywork that covers the engine. But it's not just a case of clipping that on. Within that process, you have to, the wires will be dangling, and there'll be connectors there that you have to wiring loom for the rear lights to the main wiring loom on the car. And I think that was the fiddly bit, the fiddly aspect. It may have been that they got some kind of aero figures on the from the telemetry to say that the deck wasn't on quite right, but I would think more, let's not overthink this. I think that's probably to do with the lights.
Yeah. Well, they're working now, which is the crucial thing, but it's cost them 3 laps, as we say. Jeremy, some questions about the 14 car as well, and at what point during the caution that car came down pit road without Aaron Thielitz at the wheel. He was in second at the time. So what do you know about the Vassar Sullivan entry?
Well, it's now Carl Kirkwood at the rear of that car, but there was a water system problem, is what it's described. That's helpful, isn't it? I'm not sure what a water system problem means, but that's what I've been told. So that car, unfortunately, now finds itself 4 laps, I think 4 or 5 laps perhaps, even behind the race leaders in GTD. So what was looking super promising for the Lexus team in the space of, well, number 12 car already had problems, but it was that car that caused this latest full course caution. And now the sister car has had a problem during the full course caution and has gone quite a way away from the lead lap. So a new race leader again now in GTD. That would be Michael Grenier in car number 75 for Sun Energy 1. That team has been kind of flying below the radar screen. They've done a really nice job all the way through this race so far. 10 hours and 38 minutes into the race, so still an hour, almost an hour and a half away from the half distance point, but it's the Sun Energy 1 team that leads at the moment. Meanwhile, in LMP3, Scott Andrews has taken the lead. I think I might have mentioned that. He took the lead from Moritz Kranz at the restart, so number 74 ahead of the number 6 by just a few seconds. And the number 33 car, that's the Sean Creech Motorsports entry. Wayne Boyd now driving that car. It's 3 laps down, and we made a long pit stop during that caution period. I would assume the team took the opportunity to change the brakes. They had all of the LMP3 cars, because the brakes were known to be marginal on these cars, they had to make a mandatory 8-minute stop at some stage, any stage during the race, to change the brakes on their cars. So we've seen several other teams do that, and I'm pretty sure that's what Sean Creech's boys just did to the number 33 car. So it's still running in 3rd position in amongst the GTD traffic at the moment, but that stop is now done, and with, you know, this is pretty close to the halfway point in the race, so assuming the cars can make it with just one brake change through the race, job done for Sean Creech Motorsports.
Yeah, and now with the stellar talent of Ulsterman Wayne Boyd at the wheel of the 33, he was a European Le Mans Series champion in 2020, and I think just about took every pole position in that particular championship, the LMP3 part of the LMS for United Autosports last year. So great that he can get experience of the Daytona International Speedway once again. Was here with Sean Creech Motorsport last year. Yes, it was. 2020 running, and indeed part of this race in 2019 as well. No, didn't do Daytona, did do the Atlanta race though, in a Ligier JSP3 in fact. So getting steadily more and more experienced in the USA. It was a real talent in Formula Ford in the mid to late noughties. In fact, UK Formula Ford champion in 2008. I think he won the festival that year as well. So Wayne Boyd back on track after he had a couple of barren years, I suppose, in the early 2010s. Although interestingly, that 33 car has just come back into the pit lane. So maybe there's something not quite right with that machine. I'd also extend that thought to the number 28 car, Maxi Boog, who's been in and out 3 times now during this stint. It was all going nicely for the previous driver in the 28 car, which I'll remind you is the Allegra Motorsports Mercedes. So we had a stint in that car for Billy Johnson, which was 32 laps. That was bang on the money. But then Billy had to pit during the caution when it wasn't the time for GT Daytona cars to make their stops. He handed to Maxi Boog in what could have only have been an emergency service pit stop. So I guess on the very next lap when Maxi Boog came in, that would have been a drive-through penalty for breaching the regulations. But then 5 laps later, Boog came in again and has since remained out. But something not quite right with the 28 car, and also the 33. What was that? Just in and out? Maybe a penalty for that car as well. Yes, here we go. Servicing the car from behind the wall. 33 has assessed a drive-through penalty as a result. Car staying in 3rd position, but has let a few more GT Daytona cars through as well, including Ian James, Lars Kern, Ben Keating. Should make relatively quick work of those cars, although as we've said, the performance of an LMP3 car, very strong in the corners, not so strong when you're relying on the mechanical grip, when a GT car can easily match its speed. That's something that everyone's got to get used to pretty quickly. The first Rolex to include LMP3 cars. I still feel like we're in that adjustment period even now, this deep into the weekend. 57 car of Maro Engel leading GT Daytona. It was a number of hours ago, Jeremy, when Indy Dontje was piloting this car to the lead of the class. So Winward Racing are back there again in 57.
They are. It's been a really good run for that team. So yes, the number 57 now ahead of number 75. Simon Mann, he's doing a nice job, isn't he? The young Englishman at the wheel of that number 21 Ferrari, in 3rd position, still ahead of the Aston Martin of Ian James. Hard racing car, car number 23 in 4th position, and Lars Kern in the plaid Porsche, the Fath Motorsports machine, in the 5th position, car number 9. Then Ben Keating in the Aston Martin 4TF Racing, was the top 6 in GTD. Just had an update on the Mazda problem from Larry Holt. Thank you very much, Larry. He was the main man at Multimatic Motorsports, and they had to change the tail, I think as you suggested, Johnny and/or Joe, due to a problem with the lights. But when they went to change the tail, they broke a mounting pin, so the tail wouldn't go back on again, or wouldn't stay on again. So they had to fix that. The car back is out again now, though. And so, you know, they're still not even halfway through the race. So 3 laps out, off the lead at this stage is certainly not the end of the world.
No, might feel like it at this stage, yeah. But it's important
after all that hard work.
Well, yeah, and it's not much reward, frankly, for redressing the balance. You're a lap down for a long time, think, oh brilliant, we can get the lap back now and be on the lead one, and then immediately afterwards you lose a further 3. It is literally gain 1 step and 3 steps back again. But just as quickly as you gain 1 lap, you only need a few more cautions in the second half of the race, and it can swing back in your favour very, very quickly. I'm sure cars have come from further back than that to score podiums in this race, so definitely all not lost at the moment. And important just not to get distracted. You've just got to focus on the stint in hand right now.
Absolutely right, Johnny Palmer. And in LMP3, the number 6 car from Michelin Motorsports America, that was 4 laps down at the end of the first hour, and then came back to lead. For a goodly portion, is now in second place behind Scott Andrews, number 74 for Relive Motorsports. But even in less than half the race, number 6 car made up 4 laps on the rest of the field in LMP3. So yeah, very much so, it can be done.
Joe,
just as a lead though,
go on.
Top. Well, actually, just on this lap, Albuquerque managed to pull out a little bit, but he was 4 cars in a train there. Albuquerque, Magnussen, Simon Pagenaud and Pipo Derani, so the Acura and then 3 Cadillacs already nose to tail, and with Oliver Pla only another couple of seconds back in the 5th position.
I suppose it's very easy to run away, Joe Bradley, with what's happening in your race right at this moment, but you may at times have a 3-minute lead. You can't even start to think that you've got the race won at that stage, and likewise if you're 3 laps down, you can't think, well, we're done for the whole of the day, because motor racing just has this pattern, this rhythm, this habit of giving one moment and then taking away the other, or vice versa. So it's just about concentrating on the stint in hand and trying to get as good a lap times out of it as you can.
And absolutely, Johnny, and the distinction between a good team and a great team is just how they react to the kind of adversity we saw there that befell the number 55 Mazda there. 3 laps down, over 13 hours left. You've got to keep pushing, because who's to say that the car's ahead of you? And this is what you've got to keep open. You've got to keep pushing and pushing, and hope that some kind of bad luck will befall the cars in front of you. The thing about this series is the cars are so optimised in this race, and we saw that at the last restart. We saw Albuquerque go at Magnussen and round the outside into turn 1 at the restart, and you think, hang on a minute, mate, why did you not get the memo? There's still, there's still 13 and a half hours left. It's such a competitive race that times like that, where you can make up time, and just look at that, he's got 3-second lead now over Magnussen in second, and that for me just tells you the kind of character of the Daytona 24 hours, when really you have to be pushing all the way for the whole 24-hour duration. It's incredible.
And I suppose experience at those restarts is massive, and Kevin Magnussen will obviously have experience of that from F1 days and from further down in the single-seater ladder, but I don't think they're ever quite as intense as you get them here at Daytona, where there's not an inch given or taken away. And it's also about the moment that you hit the throttle coming out of turn 4, you have to be careful not to have crossed the line before, but not to have overtaken the car alongside you before you get to the solid white line. But it's knowing about the little intricacies about this track, which Philippe Albuquerque, has researched year on year, and he knew where to put the car at the restart, which was on the outside of the 0-1, which would then automatically give him the inside as they go through the kink just before the international horseshoe. So it's that track knowledge, I think, which is so key to this event. And Kevin Magnussen will have learnt a thing or two from that restart, I'm sure about that. He's running in second position, just 3 seconds away from Philippe Albuquerque, so there's no question about some solid pace from the day. Last time, though, he did lose around about half a second as Albuquerque heads across the line to complete 360 laps. We Meanwhile, in LMP2, Giorgio Sergiotto in the Dallara, currently outpacing all the Oricas. I have to say, I didn't see that coming at the start of the event. Dallara in ACO rules racing has generally struggled versus the Orica, but I suppose a little bit of favourable pit stop for the strategists at Chetalar Racing. And car 47 out front by nearly 25 seconds from 4 Oricas behind. Jeremy Shaw, you were about to make a point thinking about DPI.
Yeah, a couple of things. The change of lead at the restart was the 33rd lead change in this race by my reckoning. But now the 10 car out in front. The other thing I was going to say is that, yeah, you're right, in P2, LMP2, Giorgio Sergiotto, who's got a lot of experience in these cars, of course, has edged out a little bit over Stephen Thomas in second position. But you know, he's brand new to this sport. He's really been racing for a year. His first race was just over a year ago, literally. And in third position, John Ferrano, he's been around the sport a long, long time. He's hanging in there in the third position. Eric Lux is just a couple of laps back in the fourth. He's having he's actually pulled away from Dwight Merriman over the course of the last, since the restart. But there's a super battle going on there. GTLM's, no change there. It's still mighty close. But what's interesting to me is in LMP3, the number 74 car, Scott Andrews, is most definitely edging away now from Moritz Kranz. The gap is out to 11 seconds between the first two in LMP3.
Yeah, Ferrano getting more and more used to LMP2 machinery. He had been a champion in 2018 in P3 when he won that with RLR M Sport in Europe, but then moved up to LMP2 level in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 2019 version. There were actually 2 Le Mans in that particular season, but RLR Sport / Tower Events was the entry then. Become Tower Motorsport, running here at Daytona in LMP2 last year. That was his first Daytona, I reckon, for John Ferrano. So back again to attack this great race, and a years and years worth of experience paying dividends right now. Some very varied colours on the Ferris wheel on the infield right next to Lake Lloyd. Again, providing that iconic shot of nighttime Daytona. And thanks once again to Rooftop Ray doing a brilliant job. If you've not yet headed to IMSARadio.com for the video feed of this event with our audio synced perfectly, you can do that very easily. IMSARadio.com, and at the top of the page, top left, it says live video. Click on that, and if you're outside of the US, you should be fine to get both audio and video perfectly synced. Good battle out on track now in the DPI category. Is the second and third place scrap for Kevin Magnussen and Simon Pagenaud, both in Cadillac DPIs. It's Caddy's second, third and fourth currently, and they are absolutely together now on the run towards turn 5, the West Horseshoe. They're going to have to go on the high side of the Risi Competizione Ferrari. No opportunity to overtake Jules Gounon there. They will, at least one of these DPIs will get that move done into turn 6. And Ferrari, who obviously has to go through the corner at the same time, trying its best to stay out of the way. There's a bit of a draft picked up there by Pipo Derani, mightily experienced around this place. He just ducked into the tail of the prancing horse briefly and then jinked out of it to go to the low side to deposit Jules Gounon. And Pipo Derani has gained yet more crucial inches on the car driven by Simon Pagenaud for Ally Cadillac Racing. So it's all about that battle really at the moment between Kevin Magnussen, Simon Pagenaud, Pipo Derani, and 6 seconds away Olivier Pla in the number 60 Meyershank Racing Acura. These 3 cars scrapping for second, third and fourth, not exactly slowing one another up, but what they can't offer is the same sort of speed as our race-leading Portuguese Philippe Albuquerque, having taken the lead at the last restart, and that was now 25 minutes ago, has built himself, well, only 2.5 seconds. It's been slightly larger than that on occasion. But every credit to Magnussen, Pagenaud and Dirani. Not only are they duking it out for race position, but they're also just about keeping pace with the race leader. Most impressive, particularly for Kevin Magnussen, driving for the first time with a roof over his head. Yes, he's used to downforce, but he doesn't know this track so well, and he certainly doesn't know this type of car either, but he has adjusted to it like a duck to water. And, maybe that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise when you consider his father is one, Jan Magnussen. So he's kind of been around this type of racing since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, but it's one thing observing, and one thing actually getting on board a car and taking active part. Down the inside there, into the bus stop goes Philippe Albuquerque. A couple of gear shifts to locate third, probably third, and then out at the bus stop, powering its way into Speedway Turn 3. 2.5 seconds is pretty stable at the moment though, Jeremy Shaw. First, back to second, third and fourth.
Yeah, it is. It's just stable out nicely. I don't think anybody's pushing terribly hard at this stage of the race, but they are doing without too much traffic. They're doing mid-36s, which is a really, really good pace. When they're not hanging around by any stretch of the imagination. And for Magnussen, he's loving driving these cars. Absolutely loving it. He loves the track. He's been as you say, he's visited many of these tracks in the past, but he's relishing the opportunity that he's been given this year. I mean, he's not looking down on Formula One in any way. Don't get me wrong here. He's thrilled to bits to have had the career he had in Formula One, but by the same token, he's relishing this opportunity. I was talking to him earlier in the week, and I'd never met him before. Well, I guess I had met him before, perhaps with his dad when he was hanging around as a kid. But in actual fact, I might well have met him at the Formula Ford Festival in 2008, actually, because he was there that year, and I think I remember seeing he and Jan at that event. And I'll tell you what, I have something in common with Kevin Magnussen, because that year in 2008, he drove a one-off home-built Formula Ford car from Denmark called the Aquila in the Formula Ford Festival, and years previously I drove the Formula Ford Festival in a one-off car, the Lannon, way back in it was 1980. That was, in fact, a little bit before Kevin was born. But it's nice to be able to have something in common with a Formula One driver, I can tell you that. But no, super guy, super enthusiastic, and he was so impressive last weekend. He's just beaming a smile every time he gets out of the car, and loves the fact that this sort of track, there's consequences. If you run off the road here, you're quite likely to hit a fence or something harder than that. In Formula One, the tracks are so sanitized these days that he doesn't have to. The track limits isn't a problem, let's put it that way, in Formula One, other than being called for penalty on it. You're very rarely going to get called for penalty for track limits here. But if you do abuse the track limits, you're likely to hit something solid. The other thing he's very much confused about is the fact that tyre degradation isn't a big factor like it has been, of course, in Formula One. Now you can push the car hard for as long as the wheel of it. He's finding a bit of a breath of fresh air. Kevin himself, I think, is a bit of a breath of fresh air. Lovely guy, running there in second place.
Nice bit of synchronicity there, considering you were there in 8-0, 1980, and he was there in 0-8. 2008. So there's another comparison, sort of mirror image, if you like. You can tune to RS2 IMSA Radio. 11 hours now completed in this year's Rolex 24 of Daytona. It's the 59th edition of this fantastic race, and we're bringing you live coverage from the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. It is time at the end of another race hour, therefore, to bring you a Master Racing update with Philippe Albuquerque leading the motor race. 366 laps just ticked off by the Portuguese, the man from Coimbra in the north of Portugal, driving the Konica Minolta Acura DPI car 10, ahead of Roskilde's Kevin Magnussen for Cadillac. For Chip Ganassi Racing returning to the prototype class in 2021 with their famous number 01 on the side of their DPI. Simon Pagenaud's third in car 48, just 7/10 of a second off the back of K-Mag for Allied Cadillac Racing. And fourth place is the 31 of Peter Durrani from Whelan Engineering. The Acura, second of the Acuras from Meyerschenk Racing with Kerb Agajanian is running in fifth for Olivier Pla. And a recovering, sadly again, 55 Mazda, now 3 laps down after a difficulty with the rear deck. It bent one of the clips, and the team worked very, very hard to get that reattached, but it's cost Harry Tinker's Mazda 3 laps. Giorgio Sergio leads LMP2 for Cetilar Racing and their Dallara LMP2 car with the 4.2-litre Gibson engine powering it. It does for all of the LMP2s in the race. Car 47 from, in second place, the number 11 car of Stephen Thomas, and then it's John Farano, the Canadian for Tower Motorsport, running in third. So 47, 11 and 8 are the numbers to look at for in LMP2. In GTLM, still the story of a Corvette 1-2, 4 leading 3, Nick Tandy ahead of Jordan Taylor, but only half a second between them. Then Jesse Krohn, the BMW from Team RLL, M8 car 24 is third ahead of Jules Gounom's Risi Competizione Ferrari 62, and Bruno Spengler in the 25. The red BMW is fifth. In LMP3, Scott Andrews drives the 74 LMP3 Riley Motorsports Ligier ahead of the Duquesne of Moritz Krantz for Mullner Motorsports America car 6. And in GT Daytona, the top 5, probably all 5 different manufacturers. No, not quite actually in this snapshot. 57 is Maro Engel in a Mercedes, but with Ward Racing. It's another Mercedes for Sun Energy One in second, 75. Then Simon Mannity, AM Corsa Ferrari, number 21. Lars Kern for Pfaff Motorsports is fourth in the number 9 Porsche. And in fifth place, it's the Aston Martin, a part of Racing Team. That's car number 23. Another hour completed on RS2 IMSA Radio. That's your latest Mazda racing update. In 60 minutes time, we will have reached half distance of the 59th edition of the 24 Hours of Daytona. And we're at a phase now which fits nicely with pit stops, by the way. Some of the callers include Olivier Pla's Meyerschenk Acura and the Simon Pagenaud Allied Cadillac number 48 car. Also in from the lead of LMP2, Giorgio Sergiotto for Cetilar Racing. So this may take, to a certain degree answer us to the question of why Dallara was out front from the Oreca, but generally speaking the Oreca chassis is quicker, but the Dallara owes a pit stop, which it can serve now, and that will make 17 stops for the Italian chassis. Behind it, 4 of the French cars, the Oreca LMP207, but with the same engine from Gibson, based in a place called Repton in Derbyshire, that provide very solid race engines, being incredibly reliable, this 4.2 V8. 11 laps, 11 pit stops rather, completed for the Nick Tandy Corvette, the silver example of the C8R, rather than shares with Alexander Simmons and Tommy Milner. Tommy in prior to Nick, so therefore Alexander Simmons to come next at the end of this particular stint. Now, those cars, GT11 will have pitted, of course, under a previous caution, so should be relatively good for fuel. This point, it means that we can add a few extra laps onto the 33 laps that cars were managing earlier on. Nick did 24 laps leading into the caution. That was done almost the same again in green flag running, 21 laps completed. So we'll be fine for another at least 10, possibly 12, depending on whether he can get the same sort of mileage that his teammate Tommy Milner could do. Back onto the throttle goes Simon Pagenaud, unusually with a clear road out front. Now, Pipo Derani was obviously wasting no time at all in the 31 car, scything his way through traffic. I mentioned him picking up a little bit of a toe on the Ferrari in Speedway Turn 1 as well. And will pit on this lap together with Philippe Albuquerque and with Kevin Magnussen. So they've all, the top 3, Jeremy, have all come in, and we've had a good portion of green. I'm going to guess 22 laps of it.
Pit stops now for each of the race leaders. This is on schedule, I think, for all of them. We saw number 48 car and number 60 come in a couple of laps ago, so they were the first to make their pit stops on this sequence. And now everybody else onto the pit lane as well. Looks like a fresh set of tyres there for K-Mag, and away he goes for the Cadillac team. And Albuquerque, he's ahead of the number 31 car still. That's the same order which they came onto the pit lane. The number 10 car, I can't see, but we'll wait and see where it is. But it should be a few seconds ahead of this pair as they make their way out of the pit lane, because that's the order which they came in. It's about 3.5 seconds between Albuquerque and the rest of the field.
It is a little bit further up the road, I believe, but we'll need them all to head through the next time to get a real reflection. But all three have left the pit lane with absolutely no grip at all, because no tyre warmers, and the Michelin will be pretty much stone cold. And this is an opportunity maybe for some overtaking to be done. That was Simon Pagenaud, who hasn't just come out from the pits, maybe able to get ahead of Chase Elliott. And I think the 01 car of Kevin Magnussen in one fell swoop there, diving up the inside into the West Horseshoe went the Ally car. And that is the advantage that tyres that have been heated for a lap give you over those that haven't yet got any temperature. Neck and neck between Magnussen and Elliott in the 31 car then. But as they head through the next split, or rather towards the end of the lap, we'll get a true reflection of the order. We, before that, might even see an overtake between the 01 and the 31, because Chase Elliott got incredibly close to the tail of Kevin Magnussen, but couldn't spot an opportunity to slither up the inside there into the bus stop. Might try it again into turn 1, but this is a delicate portion of the race, I would say. Philippe Albuquerque will cross the line as the new leader. We've got those cars that pitted a lap or two before, which are firmly taking advantage, and it's brilliant to see. Let's see whether Simon Pagenaud can get even closer to Philippe Albuquerque. I'm rather licking my lips here at this part of the race, John Hindhaugh. You're in for a good portion of it, I would say. We are under an hour away from half distance, and still no real indication to the pattern of this, apart from the fact that we've still very much got 5 DPIs in the hunt for the win, and possibly the chance for the Mazda to catch up 3 of the laps that it lost earlier on.
Yeah, that's the only disappointment for me, if I'm honest, Johnny, is that the Mazda number 55 is not there. Still the 2 Acuras and the 3 Cadillacs, and still that slight differential in various parts of the fuel and tyre stint as to who has the pace in those Cadillacs. I'm finding that extraordinarily interesting. And in the other classes as well, I still think the Corvettes are doing what they need to do, although they're a little bit closer than they have been. They were normally about 3/4 of a second to a second apart. They're actually now just 3/10 apart. The BMWs all of a sudden coming to life as well in the darkness hours. And the joy is that we're going to take it up to pretty close to sunrise as JP takes his leave. Jeremy Shaw stays with me in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, and we join up with our American TV network colleagues in 10 minutes time as the now traditional night owl shift, where we get the reins from NBC, and Rooftop Ray will be our guide and help for 3 hours between 3 and 6 here at Daytona. Nick Damon will be joining us as well for part of that stint. So Jeremy, the race not halfway through, as JP says, and I am liking what I'm seeing. It seems that despite this being the first race of a new season, the IMSA technical team have once again done their calculations, and certainly the sharp end of the field, you would expect it in LMP2 where the drivetrains are all the same, but certainly in the sharp end of the field, I don't think there's anybody who's got a massive advantage here. It's really ebb and flow depending on who's in the car and where they are in the stint.
Completely agree with you, John. Absolutely. They're sitting very close to the match. The number 60 car seems to be struggling a little bit, I think. But you know, he's hanging in there. You know, not even to halfway yet, so no point in extending anything at this stage in the race. It's certainly been interesting over the last hour or so to see the number 10 car going so well. First of all, Alexander Rossi did a super long stint in that number 10 car. Took the wheel of the car at 7 hours into the race. He drove for about 2.5 hours before handing over to Philip Albuquerque, and he was absolutely flying. Set that car's best laps of the race so far, and then Albuquerque's continued on from there. He took the lead at the restart about 40 minutes or so ago, a bit more than that, 45 minutes or so ago, and has been out front ever since. So, you know, the Acura certainly is looking good. We thought perhaps the Acura might struggle a little bit, or they thought they might struggle a little bit, but the emphasis on the little there, because there really doesn't seem to be much to choose between any of them, John. And, you know, the Mazda, having lost that lap early on, missed the opportunity to get back onto the lead lap quite a long time ago now, then finally had the opportunity during the most recent caution period, but unfortunately only to suffer a problem with the tail, which has now cost them, instead of gaining 1 lap back on the field, they lost 3. So that was rather unfortunate. But having struggled, I think, through the evening, John, the Mazda has looked a lot better over the last couple of hours of the race, and it has been running very much on a pace with everybody else. So if they can make up those 3 laps, and they certainly have plenty of time to do that, there's absolutely no reason to count out that number 55 car.
Oh, I totally agree, and we've seen, and we know from both of their full season drivers in Ollie Jarvis and Harry Tincknell that they have super duper pace when they need to. So if they're in with any kind of sniff, I think they'll give it a go. Somebody's just asked on the Twitter at IMSA Radio R24 Radio, Jeremy, and I meant to ask you this earlier on. Lap distance record here was set last year, but for the life of me, I can't find where I put it in my notes.
I can't find mine, but I think probably not. We've had quite a few cautions already earlier on. We've had a lot of green flag running lately, but no, I don't think the record is going to be under threat.
We're looking at a tad under 800 laps here at the moment, according to the computer. I'll dig it out. It's on a piece of paper somewhere here in the Hackney Global Broadcast Centre. Nick David joining us just before 3 a.m. As I say, going to join our network colleagues at 3 Eastern. So good morning to you, Nicholas.
How are we all? Fine.
Very well, thank you, very well indeed. It's caught your eye then whilst we haven't been talking.
I think I've come back to a situation where, you know, after what, three hours away, where you've still got the first 4 cars within 10 seconds, and the 5th car not much further back. And again, within the classes, it still remained very close. So it seems, I'm not quite sure how much Green Lane had those 3 hours, but yeah, apart from the ever splitting up in many ways of the LMP2, everyone else is really getting down, turning laps, and yeah, we're just working through that meat of the race. I haven't got to halfway yet. Everyone's now pushing towards daylight, which is almost exactly 4 hours away, and see where they are before they start making their plans for what happens.
833 laps, and I still haven't found a piece of paper, but Johnny Park has saved me. That's the distance record set last year. It's the 47 Chetila Delara, which is Energy Outdoor behind the wheel of the 47 car. 7th position overall for the LMP2 leader. A lot of people saying how nice it is to see the Dallara challenging the usual mass ranks of Oringers. We've got the Eurasia Leash here as well. And it is, and it's a bonny car, that. I'm absolutely honest, I'm not sure that's the best colour scheme for it, although I like the sort of chrome finish on parts of the car. It's got quite a swoopy front end, which I think the all dark front end is going down the inside of the Sun Energy One Racing AMG GT, and also past the Motel 6 car as well, which is still in 7th position, lit up on the side of there on the in the GT3 Cadmium green car. But they've had a good run, and at the moment lead by, let's call it a minute, shall we, for Mathieu Vax-Vier, Tower Motorsport. Then the Win Autosport car, which has led in 3rd position in LMP2 at the moment, another 10 seconds further back. And Chris Meese in a prototype for the first time, getting some prototype experience, the Audi driver. I wonder why that could possibly be. Think about the future. Those are the 4 that are in touch. But Meese must be off the lead lap now. Yes, he is. Waiting to see what the night brings. Track temp, as we said would, has dropped down to 15 Celsius, which is about the same as what the air is. Not as cold as it has been at times at Daytona, as the responsible adult has just reminded us. Getting a few hours kip in the car, even under the undercroft of the fantastic Daytona Stadium terracing. It can get very chilly, Jeremy Shaw, in the overnight hours.
Well, I can remember frosts here in the past, and certainly lingering fogs, which cause long delays in the proceedings going way, way back. Yeah, you know, the weather can do just about anything this time of year in this part of Florida. Generally, it's, you know, it's what I would say pretty nice. Temperatures in the sort of 60s or 70s, and I think that's what we've had this weekend. What would you say the temperature was now?
15 Celsius. Yeah.
Which is, well, that's fairly cool, isn't it? Certainly. What's that in American numbers?
That is 62, 63.
Yeah, 62. So that's, you know, for overnight hours, that's not bad at all. But you know, it's certainly a different racetrack now as far as the cars are concerned, the drivers, than it was during the day when the sun was beating down on the track. And that's one of the great things about this event in particular. The fact that it does take place this time of year, where there's more variation in the weather than there is at somewhere like Le Mans in the middle of the summertime. Yeah, it's been dry all the way along. I think the forecast is dry all the way through this road. So you know, we've been blessed with super weather this week. And right now, you know, the drivers seem to be enjoying these sort of conditions, because the cars I think are being pretty consistent under these nighttime conditions.
It's Jeremy Shaw, I'm John Hindorf. This is IMSA Radio, around the world and around the track. Time to go live in sound and vision with our network TV partners.